Chapter 8:27. The little blue lamp was silent. It looked at Chinyu, who was gradually sucked into the light around the embryo egg. Its heart wasn't as calm as it appeared. For you to reach where you are today, how much bitterness have you suffered? How much suffering have you suffered? How could you give up so easily? Chinyu, come back to life. You must come back to life. Within the tomb palace, an invisible will suddenly arrived. Its boundless majesty was indescribable, as if it could suppress all. Even with the little blue lamp's level, beneath the pressure of this will, it had no choice but to extinguish all light and reveal the palace lantern's true form. The entire tomb palace suddenly expanded until it was impossible to see where it ended. It was as if a new world had been opened, and all that was left was pure white. Then, black and gold lines began to appear, particularly striking in this pure white world. The little blue lamps will fluctuated. As it stared at the black and gold lines that crazily appeared in the pure white world, it suddenly understood. No wonder its strength and might were so much weaker than it had imagined, so that ancient legend was actually true. It was actually, but like this, if Chinyu wanted to obtain its approval and borrow its strength to be reborn, the difficulty would be 10 times or even 100 times greater. His originally faint hope was nearly completely lost. More and more black and gold lines appeared, rapidly spreading in all directions until they filled the entire pure white world. When it finally finished growing, a heaven-shaking array formation would form. It could reverse yin and yang, life and death, and even change the sun and moon. Even the little blue lamp was at a loss as it faced this array formation. It could only feel the terrifying aura contained within it that could subvert and change all. As you can see, I have wasted a precious chance. Whether he lives or dies, that is all up to him. An indifferent and calm voice echoed out from all directions of the pure white world. It rumbled like thunder, shaking the trillions of black and gold lines. Hum, hum. The array formation activated. Deep in the endless sea, the terrifying vortex formed by the swirling seawater had already vanished. On the altar that was like the base of a great city, a phantom formed from interweaving light reared back its head and roared. A terrifying aura swept out in all directions. The giant sea beasts lying around the altar shivered and blood gushed out from their noses and mouths. Some even fell down, their bodies twitching unconsciously. Even so, the sea beasts didn't dare to make a single sound, and none of them dared to run away. This was because the existence on the altar was the supreme ruler of the endless sea, the only master that all the sea beasts submitted to. It was the sea god. The few powerful and intelligent sea beasts knew that their masters had been waiting for this day for countless years. But in the end, it failed. At a time like this, any existence that attracted the master's attention would be torn to shreds without hesitation. Staying silent might be able to survive. But this time, their hopes were dashed. The phantom of interweaving light on the altar suddenly stopped roaring. It stared straight at something above its head. The entire sea seemed to sense the ruthlessness it emitted from its body, instantly falling into a deathly stillness. If one stood above the clouds in the sky and looked down, they would see that the most violent and bizarre part of the boundless sea had become calm without any warning. It was as if it had been wiped away by an invisible hand, and there were no longer any ripples. The sea beasts around the altar began to tremble. They could feel the shadow of death looming over their hearts. Roar! The phantom on the altar suddenly let out a roar, and the mirror-like surface of the sea instantly shattered. It was like a vicious beast that had finally awakened after countless years of slumber. Bang, bang, bang. The sea beasts that crawled around the altar were like overinflated balloons as they began to explode one at a time. Flesh and bones flew everywhere. Endless blood gushed out, dyeing the seabed red. The thick smell of blood assailed the senses. But soon, these pieces of flesh and blood flew towards the altar at an astonishing speed. They gathered together, erupting with an astonishing vitality as they wriggled and grew. Rumble, rumble. The sea crazily tumbled, and giant waves surged into the heavens. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared from the seabed. It rapidly approached the surface and became clear. Bang! The sea surface shattered, and a massive creature drilled out from the seabed. It was shaped like a bull, and its body surpassed 100,000 feet. Its entire body was covered in thick black scales, and 3 horns jutted out from its head, fiercely pointing towards the skies. As soon as it emerged from the sea, endless seawater rose up, turning into black clouds that lifted it up. Roar! With a loud roar, its 4 hooves rapidly galloped forwards. It flew towards Starfall Archipelago on the black clouds. Within the black-gold array formation, Qin Yu's figure floated in the air. Countless motes of light gathered around him, as vast as the stars in the sky. These motes of light drilled into his body but flew out in the next moment, unable to fuse with him. After an unknown period of time, a calm and indifferent voice sounded out. You have seen it for yourself. It isn't that I don't want to save him, but that he can't do it himself. The little blue lamp said, give him some more time. You know that even if I wait any longer, he won't have a chance. Why waste the little time you have left? If you want, you can bury his corpse here. One day, in the future, when I find the person I am waiting for, there might be a chance that he will come back to life. The little blue lamp was silent. It slowly shook its head. Even if that day comes, the one who comes back to life will not be him. Its eyes fell on Qin Yu. We have known each other for many years, and I understand his character. If this is the result, he would rather die here. I won't force you. Take him away. The little blue lamp flew over. The motes of light that rushed towards Qin Yu began to dissipate. But at this time, a fluctuation emitted from his body. The little blue lamp paused. It could clearly feel that time had paused for a moment just now. This was the power of time. On the verge of death, Qin Yu had controlled a wisp of the Tao of time in an attempt to save his life. But unfortunately, its strength was far too weak. It could only stop time for a moment. But the mysteries of the world lay in the fact that even the most inconspicuous of details could cause a final change. For instance, at this moment, the power of time that erupted from Qin Yu's body. Within the black-gold array formation, the scattered motes of light seemed to be attracted by some great force. They crazily gathered towards Qin Yu, their numbers increasing by dozens of times and nearly submerging him. The power of time. The faint voice sounded out once more, but this time there was a bit more complexity to it that vanished. He is so young, and he is such a high boundary, yet he was able to accomplish this. What a pity. What a pity it still wasn't enough. Even if he used time as a guide to galvanize the power of the array formation, a mortal body was still a mortal body. A weak bloodline and mortal body simply couldn't contain its strength. The little blue lamp stared at Qin Yu, roaring out in its heart. Qin Yu, this is your last chance. Wake up, hurry and wake up. A massive number of motes of light constantly fused into his body. In the next moment, they scattered again. Perhaps it was because there were too many of them, or perhaps it was because there just happened to be a change within Qin Yu's body. At some point, a mote of light drilled into his body. After stumbling around several times, it finally fused in somewhere else. Within Qin Yu's chest, the ancient's heart that had fused and seemed to feel something. After a moment of pause, it began to beat once more. Thump, thump. It contracted and expanded, pushing blood to flow through his body. Even Qin Yu's own heart was able to beat once more. Blood flowed through his body. The speed at which it revolved became faster and faster. It emitted a loud, crashing sound, as if it were a surging river. Chapter 828. Even an ant knew how to live. This had nothing to do with consciousness or intelligence, but was a powerful instinct. Strictly speaking, Qin Yu had already died. The reason his mortal body had revived was because of the black-gold array formation that reversed the boundary between life and death. After experiencing life and death, his instinctive desire to live had been thoroughly activated. This desire represented a person's strongest will. It was strong enough to mobilize all the strength within Qin Yu's body. Thus, as the two hearts wildly beat in his chest, a trace of bloodline strength hidden deep within his body emerged. Many years ago, when Qin Yu was just born, it was likely that his bloodline had been ruthlessly extracted and stripped away by someone. But bloodline and life were compatible. As long as he was alive, the strength of his bloodline wouldn't truly vanish. It would only fall into a deep slumber. After his bloodline was stripped away, Qin Yu's talent was greatly damaged, and it was nearly impossible for him to step onto the great Tao of cultivation. But with the existence of the little blue lamp, Qin Yu's destiny had been changed. As he stepped onto the road of cultivation, as his cultivation grew stronger, this was in itself a process of awakening his slumbering bloodline. And the most critical step was that Qin Yu had fused with the ancient's heart. Its existence had become a turning point, and beneath the pressure of death, his bloodline strength had finally awakened. Although it was only an extremely small portion, the bloodline of that race was innately noble. The moment it awakened, a phenomenon appeared. Golden light gushed out from the void. It was magnificent and dignified, like flowing golden liquid that wrapped around Qin Yu. Golden lines appeared on the surface of his skin, rapidly extending until they covered every corner of his body. The invisible will contained within his bloodline began to contend with the ancient's body. The noble and proud ancient naturally wouldn't allow a bloodline inheritor to be assimilated into the ancient race and abandon their noble race and status. Qin Yu's complexion paled, and the ancient's heart began to violently beat. Within his blood, two strengths crazily fought each other, both wanting to swallow the other. The bloodline of that race was noble, but the bloodline of the ancient was similarly formidable. In addition to the support of the powerful ancient's heart, the awakened bloodline strength fell into a disadvantage. A change occurred as the two formidable bloodlines fought. A warm and bright light gushed out from Qin Yu's body. This was the power of holy light bestowed upon him by the Tao monarch. Before this, it had been suppressed by the ancient bloodline, but now it was finally released. Bang! A storage treasure on Qin Yu's body loudly shattered, and everything else was twisted to pieces. Only a jade box remained intact. If he were clear-headed at this moment, he would realize that this jade box was the gift the Shui sisters had given him to express their gratitude. Ever since Qin Yu obtained this item, he hadn't opened it, so he didn't know what was inside. At this moment, the jade box silently opened on its own, and a stone flew out from within. Its surface was uneven, and the bottom of each pit was dark red. It was as if the blood rain had fallen from the sky and landed on the stone, creating these potholes before fusing into it. In fact, even the Shui sisters did not know the origin of this stone. It was an ancestor of their mother's clan who had accidentally obtained it. If this stone was placed by one side for cultivation, it could act as a catalyst, allowing one to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Thus, it was regarded as a supreme treasure. Later, due to an unexpected misfortune, the stone fell into the hands of the mother who married into the Shui family and passed it on to her two daughters before she died. The reason Shui Yiye and Shui Qingqing had been forced to flee was also because of this stone. If they didn't have enough strength to protect themselves, then they would be punished for their treasures. There was no need to elaborate on this point. At this time, as holy light erupted from Qin Yu's body, the stone hidden in the box flew out on its own. It hummed and trembled before shattering into powder. 1 bead, 2 beads, 3 beads, 7 beads of blood appeared. And on the surface of this stone, there were 7 potholes. It was unknown how many years they had fused into the stone, but they were still bright red. Suddenly, faint traces of white light were released from the beads of blood, becoming one with the source holy light around Qin Yu's body. But the feeling it gave off was even higher. Although it was only a weak light, just looking at it caused one to instinctively feel endless awe, as if they were facing a god. Whoosh, whoosh, with the sound of breaking air, the 7 beads of blood howled forwards. They struck Qin Yu. but they didn't cause him any damage at all as they directly fused into his body. In the next moment, the holy light around Qin Yu suddenly rose 100 times over. Like a raging fire, it wildly tumbled up and down. Countless holy spirits condensed. They flew up and down in the holy light, their expression sincere, respectful, and joyful. They loudly cheered and praised Qin Yu. The phantom of a towering holy mountain appeared behind Qin Yu. There were 7 levels to it, as if it connected the heavens and earth. On each level, countless figures prostrated themselves on the ground, kowtowing and prostrating themselves in worship. If someone from the Western Tomb Divine Church were here, they would immediately recognize that this was the scene recorded in the scriptures of the Western Tomb Divine Church, where numerous deities knelt to the ground and worshipped the transcendent Tao monarch. This was a miracle in the truest sense of the word, because at this time, after fusing with the 7 beads of blood, Qin Yu was a true divinity of the world, and these blood beads came from the Tao monarch himself. In the distant past, the Tao monarch had personally descended to battle with the supreme elders of the ancient race. Although he had won in the end, he had paid a tremendous price. These beads of blood had fallen from the highest heavens at that time, smashing into the stone and directly fusing into it. At the level of the Tao monarch, let alone a drop of blood, even a strand of hair or a piece of skin contained a great power. With a thought, he could take it back without losing anything. But that battle had been far too dangerous. After barely winning, the Tao monarch didn't dare to stay any longer. He directly shattered the void and left this world. In normal circumstances, after he recovered from his injuries, he could open up a space channel and take back the blood. But not long after that battle, the Tao monarch had fallen into a deep slumber and hadn't woken up to this day. If it weren't for today's situation, then in another hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps the 7 beads of blood that fused into the stone would have given birth to their own will. One day, they would have been obtained by some lucky person, and the story of the Bottle Gourd brothers would have developed. Of course, now that the Bottle Gourd brothers had been stolen by Qin Yu, it was impossible for them to exist. Bang! With the Tao monarch's strength joining in, the situation within Qin Yu's body became even more chaotic. After a chaotic battle, a tripartite balance of power was formed. The strength of the ancient race was the strongest, followed by the Tao monarch's strength, and the awakened bloodline was the weakest. But if the latter two joined forces in a disadvantageous situation, they could contend with the strength of the ancient race. This formed a fragile balance. The 3 forces temporarily calmed down and watched each other with dread, all of them looking for a chance to strike. But the truth was that within Qin Yu's body, the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths weren't the only ones that had the qualifications to participate in this game. The 4th was the power of time that Qin Yu himself possessed. Although it was extremely weak in terms of strength, it was in no way inferior to these 3. The 5th was the power that shattered Qin Yu's soul and instantly killed him. It was the power that came from the black hole. Or, to be more precise, it was the power that came from the world will. It certainly had the qualifications to interfere. The power of time was weak, and after the world will killed Qin Yu, only a tiny portion of its power remained. When the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths fiercely fought each other, their influence wasn't too obvious. But when the ancient, Tao, and blood tripartite balance of power formed, the effects of these 2 strengths began to manifest. The power of time hoped to save Qin Yu's life. As for the world will, it followed its unchanging goal and wanted to destroy his body and soul. One to the left, one to the right, these 2 completely different directions. Not only did they not cancel each other out, but they instead caused an uncontrollable change to occur within Qin Yu's body. With the ancient, Tao, and blood strengths as the core, and the power of time and world will as the wings, as they gathered together, it was like a switch had been opened, causing the 5 strengths to revolve. To use a picturesque phrase, this revolution was like pushing the rolling wheels of time forward. There was nothing that could stop it, and in front of time, everything would be crushed to pieces. Indeed, there was nothing that could stop it. When the five strengths were sucked in, they were firmly sucked in. This invisible and formidable restriction was impossible to break free from. Rumble, rumble. Within Qin Yu's body, loud rumbling sounds rose and fell without end, like the roar of thunder in the sea. An inexplicable aura was released from his body. The motes of light that gushed out from the black gold array seemed to find their way home. With loud cheers, they wildly poured into Qin Yu's body at an even faster speed. This time, they didn't leave. Rather, they directly entered the vortex formed by the five strengths. It was like the strongest adhesive, causing the five strengths to fuse together so that they could no longer separate. Hum, hum. The entire array formation trembled, emitting loud rumbling sounds. The black gold runes that formed the array formation each erupted with a rich light. The little blue lamp's main body flashed, and its figure appeared once more. Its eyes widened, shock and excitement filled its face. This was indeed a change that it had never imagined would occur. In this hopeless situation, Qin Yu had found a path to survival once more. One fate, 2 lives, 3 bloodlines. Indeed, destiny reigned above all else. It was impossible to guess at. It was clearly a hopeless situation where he was doomed to vanish into thin air. But in the blink of an eye, the situation had been reversed. This was a great destiny. Sure enough, its judgment wasn't wrong. Qin Yu was destined to not fade into the crowd. There would come a day when he would become one of the most dazzling existences in the infinite heavens. With a deep breath, the little blue lamp looked up and loudly said, "How is it?" The black gold array formation was quiet. After a long time, the faint voice sounded out, sighing a bit. With his current level, there is no hope of him obtaining my approval. But now, with the 5 strengths added to his body, even though we are clearly enemies and cannot communicate with each other, the current situation has occurred. This is because his fate is not fated to die. The little blue lamp bowed, its expression solemn. Please rest assured, although Qin Yu is small and weak right now, after today, he has defied the heavens and changed his fate. His future is limitless, and he will not disgrace you. The voice continued, "You should have already seen the problem with me. If you give your mark to him, his future path will not be smooth. Not to mention 1,000,000,000,000 thunder tribulations. He is destined to withstand countless dangers. If something happens to him in the future, I fear his fate will be tens of thousands of times more miserable than today." The little blue lamp stood up. "I will borrow Qin Yu's gaze to answer your reminder. While alive, everything is possible, but after death, everything is nothing. He is not the person I have been waiting for, nor has he obtained my approval. But all sorts of lucky chances and coincidences have allowed him to reach this step. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens. Whatever happens in the future, it will no longer concern me." Just as its voice fell, the black gold array formation erupted. A terrifying aura surged out, shaking the little blue lamp and sending it flying away. Space flashed in front of it. It appeared where Qin Yu had shattered the ice-soul jade bed. It had been forced out from the layered world. The little blue lamp gripped its fists, a carefree smile on its face. It had succeeded. Above the boundless sea, a giant beast with a triangular head like a bull roared forwards on black clouds. Wherever it passed, the color of the sea changed. Endless black clouds gushed out from nothingness, weaving together and blotting out the skies. Rumble, rumble. Endless thunder erupted as the clouds tumbled. Heaven-shaking rumbles swept out in all directions, illuminating the world with a radiant light. Monstrous waves rose up in the sea, roaring and roaring. From time to time, it would take the form of a giant beast. Occasionally, thunder would strike it, instantly covering it in a suit of thunder armor. Its momentum soared to the heavens. It was the sea god, born from the endless sea. It was born with its own consciousness and knew the destiny it shouldered. The Beast Trainer Alliance's mystic realm shouldn't have existed in the world to begin with. It was only because of the existence of the sky-piercing jade wall that it was preserved. As for the sea god, it was originally a consciousness that shouldn't have appeared in this world. It was only born because the will of the world pushed it forward. When it first developed its consciousness, the sea god followed the will of the world. It wholeheartedly wanted to destroy the sky-piercing jade wall and cause the mystic realm world to collapse so that the circulation of the world laws would return to the right path. But as it failed again and again, time gradually passed. The sea god suddenly felt a crisis. It and the Beast Trainer Alliance's mystic realm were one and the same. If the jade wall was destroyed and the mystic realm collapsed, there would be no meaning in it continuing to exist. It would only be destroyed. The sea god didn't want to dissipate like this, but it also couldn't disobey the will of the world. The will of the world had given it its only mission. This was something that had been instilled into its consciousness when it was born. If it resisted the will of the world, then it would immediately collapse and wither away. Soon after, a new sea god would be born, but it would no longer be related to it. It couldn't disobey the will of the world, and it also wanted to continue living. It didn't take too much time for the sea god to find a method that satisfied both sides. It didn't destroy the sky-piercing jade wall, but swallowed and fused its strength. After the mystic realm was destroyed, even if the will of the world didn't permit its existence, it still wouldn't be able to erase it. Simply put, the incomparably powerful sea god was only a pitiful consciousness that wanted to continue living. The chance it had waited for so many years had been destroyed at the critical moment. The sea god was incomparably angry, but it could still suppress its anger. This was because as long as the jade wall existed and the mystic realm wasn't destroyed, it would have endless time and could continue waiting for the next opportunity. Moreover, the little insect that ruined its plans had already been erased by its strength. But not long ago, atop the altar at the seabed, the sea god suddenly sensed a change in the aura of the sky-piercing jade wall. It had opened the inheritance mark. It had actually opened the inheritance mark. This was the result that the sea god couldn't accept. Once the inheritance mark was completed, the sky-piercing jade wall would automatically dissipate and the mystic realm would collapse. The will of the world had achieved its goal, and it would be destroyed along with it. Without any time to think about who it was that had the qualifications to obtain the approval of the sky-piercing jade wall, the sea god cast aside all scruples and rushed towards Starfall Archipelago. It wanted to thoroughly kill that person. Otherwise, once the inheritance mark was completed, it would be destroyed. No one could stop it. Absolutely no one, bang. Chapter 829. The shattered space was immediately torn apart. The white ape that Shinyu had seen on the foggy island stepped out. His expression was cold, and his eyes were filled with ridicule as he looked at the sea divinity that had been sent flying away. He sneered, "I haven't seen you for some time, and it seems you've forgotten the taste of my fist. You actually dare to run up to me and act so wildly." Roar! The sea divinity roared. Its massive body came to a stop, and it glared at White Ape. "Today, even if it is you, don't think of stopping me. Hurry up and screw off. Otherwise today will be the day you die." White Ape secretly frowned. He wondered just what sort of stimulation this fellow had received. It seemed he was going to do it for real. His thoughts raced, and he sneered. "Just a loser like you dares to be so insolent in front of me." The sea divinity roared, "Kill!" Bang! Everywhere one looked, the trillions of seas instantly erupted. Monstrous waves rose up, sweeping through the world. In the vault of heaven, within the black clouds that blocked out the sun, the roar of thunder filled the air. Lightning howled and gathered, condensing into several thunder dragons. They roared as they dived down from the black thunder clouds, drilling into the monstrous waves. The thunder dragons wreaked havoc in the waves, inlaid with thunder. Their momentum rose even higher. White Ape spoke casually, but in truth he didn't dare to be careless when facing the sea divinity. If he were in perfect condition, then even if the sea divinity's strength came directly from the world source will, White Ape would still be able to easily beat him up. But right now, it was best to be a bit more cautious. He didn't know what sort of madness this fellow had gone through, but if he were to fail miserably in a simple task, that would truly be a joke. With a loud shout, White Ape lifted a hand and pressed it forwards. His arm wildly rose, becoming like a divine mountain that supported the heavens. His 5 claws were sharp to the extreme and shined with a blue-gold halo as they slammed down at the monstrous waves. There was a heaven-shaking explosion. Giant waves rose up in the sea as they were split apart. Several thunder dragons cried out miserably as if they had been struck by an apocalypse. They all exploded and dissipated. But White Ape wasn't unharmed. After the thunder dragons exploded, endless thunder erupted, wrapping around his arm. Every white hair emitted light to resist. Even so, beneath the ravaging thunder, many of them were scorched and fell off. The White Ape furrowed its brows and clenched its claws tightly. The lightning that was spreading rapidly from the bottom to the top was suddenly pulled back and condensed into a lightning bead in its hand. Perhaps it was because it had condensed too much lightning energy, but this lightning bead was pitch black in color, and a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate erupted from it. "Here you go." With a sneer, White Ape suddenly flung the black lightning bead like a boulder, sending Sea God flying. Pitter-patter, the black lightning was torn apart. Sea God's eyes turned blood-red. "White Ape, you forced me to do this." The violent aura around its body suddenly increased by dozens of times, turning into a raging sea in the midst of a hurricane. The black clouds in the sky suddenly became even darker, as if they had been poured with sticky ink, blocking the light and plunging the world into darkness. What was strange was that the sea below did not continue to roar. Instead, it fell into a strange tranquility. The seawater gently rippled, and there was no trace of the tyrannical appearance that it had a moment ago when it wanted to destroy the world. White Ape furrowed his eyebrows. He stared at Sea God and cursed inwardly. They had only fought for a single round, not even a warm-up, and now it had decided to burn its source? Damn it, this thing had really been greatly stimulated. Those people from the Beast Trainer Alliance definitely didn't tell the truth. Damn it, once this matter was over, he would definitely let them know just how terrifying the consequences of deceiving an old man were. At least 30% of their storehouse would be emptied. No, at least half. Chinyu felt as if he were in a dream. In this dream, his consciousness was torn to pieces and he floated emptily in space. Chinyu could feel something constantly being stripped away, dissipating into the world. His consciousness became increasingly blurry and unclear. He began to worry, trying to stop this from happening. But in the end, he discovered that there was nothing he could do. He could only sense himself weakening bit by bit. His shattered consciousness gradually fell into chaos. After an unknown period of time, a warm strength surged in from all directions. It gently wrapped around the fragments of Chinyu's consciousness, slowly piecing them together. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. At some point, when the last piece was pieced together, Chinyu's consciousness woke up. He opened his eyes. What he saw was a pure white world. Within this world were inlaid countless black and gold lines. They wove together, exuding a mystical aura that he couldn't understand. A sky-piercing jade disk came from the endless highest heavens. It fell to the ground, with no end in sight and no beginning in sight. Within the jade disk, one could faintly see a vortex spinning. And within this vortex were 5 different colored streams of air: white, black, blue, red, and yellow. They constantly spun along with the vortex. Where is this? Who am I? Chinyu had a blank look. He slowly swept his eyes over this strange world. Just as his thoughts fell, a voice sounded out, grand and calm, reversing life and death, returning from the world of the dead. Even if your consciousness hasn't completely dissipated, death is death. Even if you have resurrected now, this is the second life of your life. The memories of your past life have already been sealed in your soul. If you really want to know who you are and why you came here, you can only rely on yourself to awaken these sealed memories. Chinyu closed his eyes. He thought back over and over again. In his blank mind, there were indeed some fragmented images. But the more he wanted to capture them, the more he couldn't. Finally, at some point, a fragmented image appeared in front of him. This was a small palace lantern, emitting a deep blue halo in the dark night. It was like the world's cleanest and most transparent sea, filled with a mysterious aura. This is the little blue lamp. Yes, it was the little blue lamp. Bang! The gates of memories opened, and all sorts of past events rapidly appeared in his mind. They occupied the vast majority of his life. After obtaining the little blue lamp, all of his memories were restored in several breaths of time. But this wasn't the end. After a brief pause, Qin Yu's memories continued to appear. This time, they were his memories from before he obtained the little blue lamp. The speed was fast. In the blink of an eye, the icy cold rain of his childhood appeared. He hid under the eaves, shivering in the cold. Just as he felt he couldn't hold on and was about to faint, Onigu opened the door and brought him home to take care of him. That was the warmest and most peaceful time of Qin Yu's life. Gulinger followed behind him all day, shouting, big brother, wait for me." But as he continued forwards, his memories became blurry. Perhaps it was because he was in too much pain, so he instinctively chose to forget, or perhaps some people didn't want him to remember, so they erased them. Qin Yu's head began to ache. He grabbed his head with both hands and fell to the ground. As for the memories that gushed out, they continued forwards. His memories became even more fragmented, like a mirror that had been smashed into countless fragments. They were all haphazardly piled together, making it impossible to distinguish what they were. "Ah!" Qin Yu roared out loud. Blue veins bulged out on his neck, and blood flowed out from his head. Memories continued to gush out, but at an increasingly slow pace. The time it took to restore the memories of the first dozen-some years of his life had far surpassed the memories of the 100-plus years after he had obtained the little blue lamp and stepped onto the path of cultivation. Suddenly, a scene appeared in Qin Yu's mind. It was a short mountain, and at the top of it was a building that resembled an ancestral shrine. It was blurry and indistinct, but he could see that the sky was blood red, accompanied by the roar of thunder and a torrential downpour. "Ha!" The scene shattered. Qin Yu fiercely raised his head and roared out loud. It was like someone had pulled out his spine, and the pain reached deep into his soul, leaving behind an indelible mark. Pain, fear, resentment, unwillingness, all sorts of emotions crossed through space and time, suddenly appearing in Qin Yu's heart. All of the memories that he had forgotten in the past had all returned. Where is this? Why do I remember this place? Why is it so painful? Qin Yu's body shivered. His pale face was devoid of blood. He tried his best to remember, but after this scene, everything fell into darkness. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the slightest fragment of memory in this darkness. Qin Yu fiercely looked up and roared. "Why are my memories incomplete? Why haven't they been restored?" An indifferent and grand voice echoed out. "You should ask yourself these questions. If you can't find an answer, then you can leave it for the future." Qin Yu took one last look at the scene and suppressed it into the depths of his memory. He took a deep breath and bowed. "Thank you for saving my life." As his memories were restored, he naturally knew the reason why he was able to revive. "There is no need to thank me. You were the one who fulfilled my request. I only gave you a chance based on the principle of fairness." The voice continued. "Now, you must make your final choice. I confuse with you, but the mark will not be complete. I will need to swallow the strength within your body to complete the transformation. The transformation can succeed or fail. Both can be divided evenly. If you succeed, you won't obtain any benefit for the time being. Maintaining your cultivation unchanged is already the best result. Moreover, you will have to shoulder a tremendous amount of karma in the future. If you fail, you might be able to survive, but it will be difficult to preserve your cultivation. If you choose to fuse with me, you must begin now. If you don't want to take this risk, I can still send you away from here." Qin Yu looked up at the vortex within the sky-piercing jade annulus. He looked at the constantly spinning colors of white, black, blue, red, and yellow. Without hesitation, he said, "I choose to fuse with you." With his own strength, it was impossible for him to obtain its approval. He had died once, and countless coincidences and good fortune had allowed him to encounter this opportunity. How could he give up? Moreover, that short mountain in his memories, as well as that majestic and dignified ancestral shrine. Just where was it? Qin, you needed to find that place and retrieve all of the memories that had fallen into darkness. He wanted to know why he felt such fear and hatred, and what had happened in that place. Qin, you had a clear intuition that if he didn't choose to fuse with them, then even if he had the little blue lamp in his hand, he would never have the qualifications to step onto that short mountain. Thus, he had to take this gamble. Chapter 830. The 5 strengths could be absorbed by the jade, annulus, to make up for the incomplete mark. But the 5 strengths in Qin Yu's body all had astonishing origins. How could they be willing to fuse with other strengths and lose their own nature? Thus, changes occurred within the sky, piercing jade, annulus one after another. What it couldn't tolerate the most was fusing with itself and helping Qin Yu obtain the mark. It was clearly the power of the world's destruction. It had been given the will to thoroughly kill Qin Yu, so that his soul would scatter and he would never be able to reincarnate. Within the vortex of the jade, annulus, white light suddenly erupted. The vast aura of endless years was released from within. It represented that it had lived through trillions of years, coexisting with the world, sun, and moon, indestructible and indestructible. Even if it dissipated for a time, it would reform in the endless river of time. A pair of indifferent eyes appeared, icy cold and without the least bit of emotion. They fell on Qin Yu. Thou dare to fuse with me? Rumble, rumble. It was like a trillion bolts of thunder exploded in his mind. Qin Yu's consciousness fell into a blank. He could feel the heavens roaring, the earth howling, the seas and mountains issuing cold warnings to him that he could not take a single step out of the pool of thunder, otherwise he would be beyond redemption. Countless voices, men and women, young and old, all of them screamed at him, telling him to crawl before the world's will. Only like this could he obtain its forgiveness. A phenomenon appeared. The world's strength refused to fuse with him, and the sky-piercing jade, annulus, maintained its silence. This was Qin Yu's own choice. If he encountered any difficulties, he would have to rush through them himself. After several breaths of time, Qin Yu let out a long breath. He looked up at the vortex and saw the icy cold drowning in the world's strength. In truth, this isn't the first time I've seen eyes like yours. To be more accurate, I've interacted with them several times. So, scaring people is useless against me. Today, I will fuse with you. If you want to settle accounts with me, then feel free to come at me in the future. The little blue lamp revealed a faint smile. It knew that the trial of the world's will that was the most difficult for others was actually the easiest for Qin Yu. Bang! The white pillar of light in the jade, annulus, shattered. The pair of eyes looked deeply at Qin Yu, remembering his appearance and aura. Then, they vanished from sight. Roar! With a loud roar, the phantom of a giant appeared in the blue pillar of light that represented the power of the ancient. This giant towered between the heavens and the earth, eyes as bright as the sun and moon. An ancient and boundless aura was released from the giant's body. It was like a divine mountain that supported the heavens, upright and unbending. The giant lowered his head, his eyes locking on Qin Yu. Future generations, you should know that my ancient race was born to support the heavens and earth. Even if death strikes us, we will never compromise. Qin Yu had a calm expression. The ancient race has suffered a great calamity. In the present world, I might be the only one left alive. Today, I will give my all. If I succeed, I, Qin Yu, vow that I will rebuild the ancient race in the future and restore them to their past glory. The giant was silent for a long time. Then he slowly closed his eyes. If I go back on my word, then my ancient bloodline will surely collapse. I would rather be destroyed than exist in this world. Qin Yu solemnly said, "All right." The giant turned around and disappeared in a single step. The green pillar of light shattered. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He looked at the black column of light in the vortex. According to their mutual connection, he could determine that it represented the Tao of time. Darkness represented the unknown and the mysterious. Perhaps this was the essence of time. It was only by chance that I was able to reach my current level and come into contact with the supreme Tao of time. To tell the truth, I've only touched a small part of it. I'm still far from being able to grasp it. So, I don't understand the characteristics of time, nor can I persuade you otherwise. If you still have your own consciousness, then there is something you should be aware of. We are one. If I live a wonderful life, then you can also shine. If I fade away into the crowd, then you're also doomed to be dim. Now, are you willing to help me? The black column of light fell silent. It seemed that Qin Yu's words weren't enough to move it. The little blue lamp's lips moved. A thought fluctuation spread into Qin Yu's mind. He frowned and slowly said, "If I become an emperor in the future, I will do everything in my power to help you free yourself. I will not go back on my word." The black column of light scattered. Like water in the depths of a cold pond, it wrapped around the white power of the world and the blue power of the ancient. Bang! The red light blazed like a raging inferno. It was dignified and noble, filled with boundless momentum. The phantom of the Tao monarch appeared. His face was stiff and his eyes were dull, like a puppet. "Those who steal my great Tao are my enemies for a lifetime. Once I awaken from my slumber, even if I have to ascend to the heavens or descend to the yellow springs, I will tear you to pieces." Perhaps this was a mark left behind in the Tao monarch's great Tao before he fell into slumber. Once his Tao foundation was seized, it would be triggered, let alone a Tao monarch who had slumbered for endless years and might never wake up again. Even if he were as fierce as the sun in the sky, Qin Yu wouldn't hesitate at all. "Tao monarch, the one who stole your great Tao is Qin Yu." Pa! The Tao monarch's phantom dissipated. Of the five forces, for had been broken, all that was left was the yellow column of light in the vortex. Qin Yu's eyes fell on it, a complex light in them. This was the spiritual strength of his bloodline that had been extracted, stripped, and yet had been restored. It represented his origin. Everything showed that from the moment he was born, he shouldn't have been an ordinary person. But it was unknown what he had experienced, but he had ended up in such a pitiful state. If it weren't for the little blue lamp, Qin Yu might have already died, turned to dust, and never learned of this matter. Perhaps, sensing Qin Yu's gaze, an old man appeared from the yellow pillar of light, his hands held behind his back. He was only a bloodline projection, but as he stood there, he was like a divine pillar that stabilized the sea. Everything around him was suppressed and forced to submit. This was potential. My people were born in accordance with the will of the world, and our bloodline is incomparably noble. Looking at the myriad heavens and myriad worlds, we are a first-class existence. If you dare to abandon it, that is the same as abandoning your people. You will be loathed by your people, and they will use thunderous methods to strip away your bloodline, reducing you to a mortal for all eternity. Qin Yu fiercely looked up. Strip away one's bloodline, reduce one to a mortal for all eternity. Only by abandoning one's people and being loathed by one's people would one receive such a heavy punishment. But according to his memories, when he was tortured and stripped of his bloodline, he was at most a child several years old. What sort of unforgivable mistake could such a young child commit? What sort of inhuman pain would he have to endure? To be tossed around by his people and loved ones, to fend for himself. In his mind, the scene he suppressed uncontrollably reappeared once more. On the summit of a low mountain, there was an ancestral shrine. The skies were like a torrential downpour of blood. In his ears, he could hear the roars of thunder in the clouds, as well as the cries of a small child's cries of fear and pain. Qin Yu's complexion paled. The scene suddenly changed. He could no longer see the short mountain, the ancestral shrine, and the sky. Instead, he saw the small figure of a child. Several cold and powerful hands were tightly pressing him to the ground. Bright red blood constantly flowed out from his body, like ink that dyed the rainwater on the ground red. Fear, hatred, despair, brutality. All of these emotions surged into his heart, causing Qin Yu's eyes to turn red. He lifted a hand and pointed at the old man's bloodline projection. So what if I abandon my people? So what if I seize your bloodline? I will wait for you. The old man angrily shouted, unfilial descendant. He lifted a hand. At this time, a terrifying aura wildly gathered, causing the entire vortex to tremble. The jade pennant shook. An invisible will descended, interrupting his movements. How is this possible? With a hoarse cry, the old man's phantom shattered. Rumble, rumble. The vortex wildly spun, sucking into shattered 5 strengths and beginning to fuse them together at an astonishing speed. White, black, blue, red, yellow. The 5 colors gradually fused into one, turning into a boundless blue and white that tumbled like clouds. Chapter 831. Bang! White Ape's giant body ruthlessly smashed down. The protective array formation around the island burst apart like a fragile bubble. With a heaven-shaking explosion, dust rose up in all directions. The entire island was smashed into several pieces, and the seawater caved in. In the next moment, the island was submerged. The tumbling seawater was torn apart, and White Ape shot up into the skies. Its shining white fur was now scorched and withered in many places. Large amounts of fur had even fallen off, revealing its red skin and flesh. It was a distressed sight. It was clear that after the sea god used his ultimate move, it was difficult for him to deal with it. In fact, from the deep sea onwards, the battlefield between the two sides had been constantly moving forward, getting closer and closer to Starfall Archipelago. Now, they had reached the edge of the island group. The island that White Ape had smashed apart had been densely populated not too long ago. It was just that before they were sucked into the battlefield, they had been urgently evacuated by the Alliance. Roar! A loud roar erupted from the black clouds above. A triangular bull-like sea god appeared. Its body was towering like a mountain, and its blood-red eyes were as round as the sun and moon. Killing intent boiled within it. It lifted its front hooves and trampled down on White Ape that had just emerged from the sea. It's coming again. White Ape cursed, his face turning green. In his current state, he didn't dare to take on the sea god trample while burning his source. He rolled away in a distressed manner. Endless seawater crashed down. The massive hooves were so deep that they couldn't be seen. The submerged island had completely vanished. Damn Beast Trainer Alliance, just what did these bastards do? Did they steal away the sea god's woman, or did they kill its son? They actually made this fellow go crazy. Over the endless years, both sides had fought several times and had a clear understanding of each other's strength. Because the sea god had always been wary, White Ape had always had the upper hand. But today, the sea god had entered a berserk state from the very start. He simply didn't care about his own losses and crazily attacked. White Ape couldn't withstand this any longer. If this continued, then unless he disregarded suppressing his injuries and attacked the sea god with everything he had, he would be finished sooner or later. But even if he could suppress his injuries and defeat the sea god, White Ape wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Even if he didn't die, he would. Looking at the bottomless hooves in the sea, White Ape gulped. He glanced at Starfall Archipelago from the corner of his eyes, uncertainty in his eyes. But very quickly, it smiled bitterly to itself. Sure enough, it had gotten used to it. At that moment, it actually wanted to take more chips so that it could open its mouth wider and reap more benefits. But the truth was that the Beast Trainer Alliance wasn't the key from the very start. If it were possible, White Ape would have turned around and left. Although he had lived for many years, he still hadn't lived long enough. The problem was that he couldn't leave. Since he'd already been implicated in this karma and obtained its benefits to protect himself, if he were to withdraw and leave now, then misfortune would absolutely descend upon him, and the outcome would probably be even more miserable. Just as White Ape was complaining incessantly and feeling anxious, the sea god suddenly let out a mournful howl. His murderous aura soared to the heavens. White Ape was startled and hastily raised his head. He thought, "What's going on? I'm the one who's getting beaten up. Why are you screaming so miserably?" But soon, White Ape couldn't be bothered with these random thoughts anymore. He stared at the sea god in the black clouds, and his heart raced, invading his mind. The inky black clouds violently trembled, and then, with a loud explosion, they began to wildly burn. The flames were a strange grayish-white color, and just looking at them would cause one to feel a deep sense of fear and despair. Roar! The sea god roared once more. Despair, anger, unwillingness, resentment, countless negative emotions wove together, nearly condensing into essence. The aura within its body wildly rose. If it had only burned a part of its source before, then now it had completely detonated. The feeling it gave off was like a living volcano, one that could swallow all things in the world at any moment. White Ape's complexion turned green. Who could tell him just what was happening? The sea god had been perfectly fine, but now it was risking its life. No, this wasn't risking its life, but that it no longer wanted to live. As a consciousness born from the world, the source of the sea god's strength was the world itself, and its source was the medium through which it used the strength of the world. Once it was completely burned away, it would lose all its strength and dissipate. The tyrannical feared the reckless feared the reckless, a sea god that didn't even care about its life. Would you be afraid of it? Chinyu wasn't afraid at all. This was because White Ape was suffering for him. When the five forces fused together, the inheritance mark began. This was a marvelous and magnificent process. Chinyu felt as if he had experienced countless samsaras and reincarnations, and every time he reincarnated, he was a bystander, witnessing the might of the great currents of time. The vicissitudes of time were nothing at all. This was because in the endless river of time, countless proud children of heaven were born. Each one of them was incomparably powerful, and with just a thought, they possessed the terrifying strength to destroy the entire world. But even as powerful as they were, they could only be like meteors. They left behind a trail of light in the river of time before finally extinguishing and falling to the earth. Chinyu could no longer remember how many proud children of heaven he had witnessed rise to glory in his samsaras. But not a single one of them had been able to escape the fate described above. Gradually, Chinyu couldn't help but think, just what boundary could he reach in order to completely transcend worldly desires and become a true eternal existence? This thought became increasingly clear and intense. It gradually took root in the depths of his mind, turning into an indelible mark. Where the road to eternal life is, no one knows. Lucky future life form, I hope that you can take that step that I have bitterly sought and become your true self. The voice sounded out in his soul, low and gentle. In the next moment, Chinyu woke up. He already knew the source of the mark. No wonder it was so formidable. It was actually, after a long period of silence, Chinyu bowed. I have no idea what step I can reach in the future, but I vow that I will search for the road to eternal life with all my strength. I will not disappoint the gifts bestowed upon me by my predecessors. The little blue lamp said, "You've woken up. How do you feel?" It looked at Chinyu, a bit curious and probing in its eyes. Chinyu's gaze fell on it. In his eyes, the great sun phantom instantly scattered, and the palace lantern enlarged with it. Runes as thick as chains appeared on its surface, but most of them were incomplete. The damaged areas were mottled with rust, like a broken bronze mirror that had been exposed to the elements for countless years. The little blue lamp seemed to sense something. There was a buzzing sound in Chinyu's ears, and the scene in front of him instantly vanished. He revealed an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry. I just obtained this ability, so I can't freely use it yet." The little blue lamp said, "I can understand, but others definitely won't. You had best control over it as soon as possible. Before you have enough strength, do not expose the existence of the mark." After a brief pause, it continued, "You should already know that there is a problem with the mark you obtained. It shouldn't have appeared. But since you obtained it, you are also included in the list of things that shouldn't have appeared." Chinyu took a deep breath and smiled. Nothing in this world is perfect. There are gains and losses. At the very least, I was lucky today. As for whether or not I will regret this in the future, I will leave it to time to determine. Chapter 832. The jade pendant pierced through the heavens, like an icy river that connected the heavens and earth. But now, the surface of this icy river was covered with cracks, as if it would shatter at the slightest touch. Chinyu stood beneath the jade pendant. He looked up at the endless skies and slowly reached out a hand. The little blue lamp frowned. Chinyu, it's fine. I can feel that it hasn't truly been destroyed. As his voice fell, his palm fell upon the surface of the jade pendant. With a slight tremble, a faint layer of light passed over the surface of the jade pendant. It was like an invisible gel that wrapped around the cracked jade pendant. This is? The little blue lamp was surprised. What it saw was a bit different from what it knew. Chinyu said, its mark isn't complete. I used the fusion of the 5 strengths in my body to supplement it, and just barely managed to make it whole. But perhaps because I provided a bit more strength, there was still a bit left over after the mark was mended, as you can see. After a moment of hesitation, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He continued to say, with this strength, I can control the jade pendant to attack one last time. The little blue lamp immediately understood. It smiled. If so, then we should leave it here. The strength of the jade pendant, even if it wasn't complete, was still enough to reverse the situation at a critical moment. Moreover, like this, it would be much easier for them to leave. Otherwise, if the mystic realm was destroyed, the Beast Trainer Alliance wouldn't give up so easily. Should we leave now? Chinyu shook his head, a complex look in his eyes. Wait a moment, I still have one last thing to do. He closed his eyes. On the ground, Chinyu's shadow wriggled like a living creature. At this moment, the door to the shadow world was pushed open. Chinyu's consciousness entered for the first time. He indeed didn't understand the path of shadow transformation, but after fusing with the embryo egg, he had truly seen the heavens and earth. It wasn't difficult for him to open an entrance. The shadow world was incomparably vast. The gray skies and earth were desolate and silent, without the least bit of life. A towering palace sat deep within this empty plain. Chinyu's consciousness stirred, and he appeared at the entrance to the hall. He pushed open the door and entered, arriving at the hall where Undying had once lived. His eyes swept around and finally fell on the ground beneath his feet. As Chinyu stepped down, the ground began to fluctuate. An entrance to the underground appeared. Stone steps led down until the end of his line of sight. Following the stone steps down, Chinyu arrived at a chamber beneath the palace. There he saw the altar and the unconscious Spirity. He frowned, his eyes filled with guilt and gratitude. He raised his hand, and wisps of light appeared between his fingers. Wait, the little blue lamp suddenly said. The great sun phantom appeared beside Chinyu. Perhaps it was because its attributes were completely different from the shadow world, but it did its best to restrain its aura. Only a faint layer of blue light wrapped around the palace lantern. Chinyu turned to look at it. Chinyu, I know you want to save her right now, but you can't do that, at least not now. The little blue lamp went straight to the point. There is a great secret behind the demonic path altar, and you should be able to see some of it by now. If it weren't for her isolating the demonic path altar from sensing you, then the existence of the mark might have been exposed. Trust me, with your current ability, it won't be long before you become truly powerful. At that time, I won't stop you. But now is not the time. Chinyu frowned. If I am careful, I shouldn't be discovered. Perhaps I can't think of a way to seal my connection with the demonic path altar. The little blue lamp said, I admit that you do have the ability to accomplish this, but there is still a certain amount of risk. Chinyu, you cannot afford to be careless in your heart. Otherwise, everything you have right now might turn to smoke, and you might even be buried alive. After a long period of silence, Chinyu looked at the sleeping Spirity above the altar. He slowly said, I swear that in the future I will return your freedom to you. I will do my best to give you everything you want. He turned and walked away. He stepped out of the chamber and stepped out of the hall. On the third step, his consciousness returned to his body. Shwa. Chinyu opened his eyes. Let's go. He lifted a hand and punched out. The space of the mystic realm directly shattered, revealing a straight channel. After fusing with the embryo egg, there was no longer any obstruction in this space for Chinyu. Shwa. Chinyu stepped out. There was a brief period of darkness before him, but in an instant, light triumphed. He came out, but at this time his complexion changed. He looked up into the skies. Endless black clouds wove together like ink, and within these black clouds, a pair of giant eyes appeared. They were blood red as they stared at Chinyu, their eyes filled with endless hatred. At this moment, the world in Chinyu's eyes was filled with malice. Roar! An angry roar sounded out in the distance. Chinyu could clearly see some invisible lines gathering in the world like cables, drawing together into a massive shadow. This shadow possessed a terrifying strength that left one's heart racing. But now, the lines that formed this shadow were constantly collapsing. Although the speed didn't seem fast, once they formed momentum, they would collapse in the blink of an eye. A mass of memories appeared in Chinyu's soul. He immediately knew the source of the eyes that were staring at him. See God, Chinyu whispered, a dignified expression on his face. Perhaps this was the first test he would face after fusing with the embryo egg. And this test involved life or death. If he couldn't rush through it, he would be dragged down by the enraged sea god, and they would fall into a hell beyond redemption. Bang! Terrifying fluctuations of strength erupted. Even though he was far away, Chinyu could still clearly feel how horrifying this strength was. Chinyu's heart raced. He turned and left without hesitation. Although he didn't know who was fighting the sea god right now, leaving now was the best choice for him. As long as he could delay for some time, the sea god would be erased by the world, and he would be safe. Chinyu was fast, but someone was even faster. With a whistling sound, White Ape howled as he flew towards him. His chest had caved in, and as he passed by Chinyu, he could even hear the sounds of bones breaking and groaning. White Ape felt his heart ache. He lamented his pitiful fate. Even though he had struggled to survive until today, he still couldn't avoid death. Damn it, he couldn't care less. If a tiger didn't show its might, people would think it was a sick cat. Even if he was going to die, he still had to ruthlessly knock down the sea god. He had to let this fellow know that even if he was an extension of the world's will, he was still nothing in front of Uncle White Ape. As White Ape wildly flew backwards, he narrowed his eyes. But at this time, a figure flashed in front of him. Woo! He looked a bit familiar. White Ape's eyes widened. It was this boy. Why was he here? Chinyu cried out in alarm. Senior White Ape. He immediately reacted. The one who had blocked the sea god just now was him. But now, White Ape had been sent flying backwards. He clearly wasn't the sea god's match. In other words, Chinyu's plan to escape and delay for some time until the sea god was erased by the world had completely failed. Bang! Black clouds roared forwards like a tide. Chinyu looked up and met the sea god's eyes in the clouds, his killing intent soaring to the heavens. Chinyu groaned inwardly. After fusing with the fetal egg, it was more like he had improved his foundation and martial talent. He hadn't obtained any additional strength at all. Facing the sea god that was on the verge of death, White Ape could only be beaten. If it were Chinyu, he would likely have fallen to his knees in a single clash. He couldn't escape, and he couldn't fight. As Chinyu's vision darkened, he heard White Ape's roar in his ears. Junior, don't be afraid. Come on my side. White Ape had been sent flying backwards. Now he stood up straight. There was a loud crackling sound from within his body, as if he were tearing apart layers of cloth that wrapped around him. An extremely tyrannical aura gushed out from within. White fur rapidly drilled out from the exposed skin of his body. In the blink of an eye, his body was restored to its original state. His fur shined with a brilliant light, like a great sun had descended upon the world, majestic and awe-inspiring. Chinyu was overjoyed. He never imagined that White Ape, who had been beaten miserably just a moment ago, would suddenly transform into a big boss. Sure enough, the heavens never barred one's way. He took a step forward, but before he could escape, a boundless strength descended from nothingness. It was like several hundred mountains were ruthlessly smashing down on his head. Even with the intensity of Qin Yu's mortal body, he still felt his chest tighten and his complexion pale. This was because he had sensed that the situation was far from good and had shifted his body slightly to avoid the strongest point of the strength. Otherwise, he feared his bones would have been broken. The black cloud that had been incomparably far away just a breath ago was now right in front of him. The sea god opened its great maw and ruthlessly bit down at Qin Yu. "Umph!" White Ape sneered. He appeared beside Qin Yu and punched out a fist. His fist collided with a sharp horn on the sea god's head. There was the sound of metal colliding like the roar of thunder. With a heaven-shaking explosion, the black cloud instantly disintegrated, revealing the sea god's towering mountain-like body. It tumbled backwards, and the horn on its head that had been punched snapped in half. White Ape protected Qin Yu as he drew back. Every step he took caused a loud explosion, causing the entire space to tremble. Looking at the sea god's broken horn, White Ape sneered in a carefree manner. "You bastard, you've chased me around for so long. Today I'll let you know why flowers are so red." White Ape stretched out a claw and pierced through space. It was unknown where he went, but he pulled out the chicken overlord. This fellow was still in a deep sleep, but he looked much more miserable. Most of the gorgeous feathers on his body had fallen off, and the hard feather on his lower body drooped weakly, as if he had gone through 18 kinds of torture. Qin Yu was stunned. Even at this time, he still couldn't help but have some random thoughts pop up in his mind. Did White Ape actually have such a hobby? Luckily, at this time, White Ape's eyes were tightly locked onto the sea god. His mind was filled with thoughts of completely destroying it before he died, so he didn't notice the change in Qin Yu's expression. Otherwise, he would have spat out a mouthful of blood and kicked Qin Yu away. "Take it and leave. Although this disappointing thing has lost this old man's face, for better or worse, it is still a descendant of my bloodline. Take good care of it in the future as repayment for me, saving your life today." A chicken and a white ape, what descendant? Even if they were a crossbreed, the difference in breed was far too great. TSK, what heavy taste. Qin Yu suppressed all of these random thoughts. He picked up the chicken overlord and shot off into the distance, his speed even faster than before. White Ape, "Little bastard, I don't ask you to stay and fight alongside me, but for better or worse you should at least pretend to stay. You actually ran away so fast." But thinking about it, Qin Yu running away so fast meant he had some self-awareness. With little Wild by his side, it shouldn't be easy for him to die. As the sea god tumbled away, it saw Qin Yu leave. Its eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. The reason it ended up in such a state was all thanks to this brat. So how could it stare on helplessly as he escaped? "If I can't live, then you will die with me." Bang! A wild strength erupted from its body. White Ape diabolically grinned. "Good. Sea god, those that dare to challenge me have already knelt down and surrendered. The next one will be you. Little fellow, did you forget how fierce Sir White's fist was just now? You actually dare to bare your fangs in front of me? Sir White's life's achievements are glorious. I will not let you set a precedent. Punk." Chapter 833. Seeing Qin Yu turn and leave, White Ape could comfort himself by saying that he knew his own limits and wouldn't die easily. But the sea god absolutely couldn't endure this. He was about to be erased by the world, and his only remaining thought was to drag Qin Yu down with him. There was a sudden roar behind him. Qin Yu's heart shrank as a chill ran through his body. Then he discovered that there was an invisible barrier in the world around him. It was like an invisible bowl had been turned upside down, imprisoning him, the sea god, and White Ape together. Of course, descriptions were just descriptions. In truth, this bowl had a bottom. Qin Yu tried to fly out from below, but was soon blocked. Qin Yu took a deep breath, and a dark gold light appeared in his eyes. The invisible barrier in front of him immediately revealed its true nature. Numerous threads that were extremely fine like silk interweaved with each other, and every single thread contained boundless and mighty power. This was the strength that came from the will of the world. Chenyu didn't have time to think about how the soon-to-be-destroyed sea god could still summon the strength of the world's will. His eyes darkened, and his complexion turned ugly. This was because the range of the barrier was shrinking. In other words, if he couldn't rush out, then the area he could dodge would become increasingly small. Finally, he would be pulled into the battle between White Ape and the sea god. If things really reached that step, then even if Chenyu's body was made of steel, he would still be ground to dust. He couldn't sit here and wait for death. Bang, bang, behind him, the battle between the sea god and White Ape erupted once more. Because of the existence of the invisible barrier, the shockwaves of energy from both sides were limited to a narrow range, causing the impact to become even more intense. Chenyu was like a reef in the sea. His aura sank as he allowed the shockwaves to strike him. As he steadily retreated, his eyes locked onto the area in front of him. A dark gold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. After several breaths of time, he lifted a hand and pointed. When his finger fell on the barrier, it felt extremely tough. There was even a shaking force that traveled up his finger bones, causing his entire arm to feel numb. But Chenyu revealed an excited expression. He could clearly see that beneath the strength of this finger, the several lines that formed the barrier began to collapse and disintegrate. It was effective. Senior White Ape, please do your best and help me buy enough time. Pa! Chenyu's finger fell a second time. At this moment, the confident White Ape, who had managed to stall the sea god, was at a loss. If it could, it really wanted to shout to the heavens, F***CK, you've been watching from the sidelines for so many years. Why are you so brazenly helping it cheat today? That's right, just by relying on sea god's own strength. White Ape will be able to easily beat him if he released the suppression of his internal injuries. But now, White Ape was facing an upgraded version of the sea god who had been strengthened by the power of heaven and earth. Moreover, he was in a completely crazy and reckless state. White Ape had only enjoyed himself for a few moments when he realized that he was starting to feel strained. He immediately felt stifled. This old man's glorious battle achievements have always been me pressing others to the ground and rubbing them. Could it be that I'm about to die, so I'm going to be ruthlessly ravaged by others? How could the ape endure this? No, I can't fail. So what if I cheat? This old man will still beat you until your face is covered in blood. White Ape's heart was filled with hatred, and he swung his fists even more violently. But this world was never one where anyone could do as they pleased. Bang! A fist smashed into the sea god's face. White Ape's face twisted and several teeth flew out from his gaping maw. With loud splashes, they smashed into the sea, causing massive waves to splash up. White Ape didn't have the least bit of happiness on his face. Instead, his expression became strange. In the next moment, he was sent flying backwards. The sea god had struck him in the chest. Blood wildly gushed out, and his bones were absolutely broken. White Ape's vision darkened, and he nearly fainted. Without waiting for the White Ape to recover, the black cloud whizzed over, like a thick curtain, and wrapped around it. Then the sea below wildly roared. Endless water vapor rose up, supplementing the black clouds, and causing them to grow in size, completely submerging the sea god and White Ape. Rumble, rumble. The black clouds violently tumbled, accompanied by a heaven-shaking rumble. It was like 1,000 thunderbolts were roaring at the same time. From time to time, there would be muffled banging sounds. These deep and heavy sounds carried with them a formidable penetrative attribute. As they passed into the two people, their hearts trembled, and they instinctively felt a chill crawl down their backs. Chenyu's mind raced. Before he had time to think, his body had already instinctively dodged. In the next moment, the place where he was standing was filled up by the White Ape's body. It smashed into the barrier. Chenyu could clearly see that because it instantly withstood a tremendous impact force, the barrier rapidly bulged outwards and lines began to rapidly collapse and decompose. This greatly increased Qin Yu's efforts. But not only did he not feel happy at all, but his heart sank to the depths of the abyss. White Ape had been defeated. Even though he was extremely close to breaking through the barrier, the sea god would only need a short amount of time to kill him. He no longer had a chance to escape. A trace of annoyance flashed in his heart, but he soon calmed down. Since there was no way out, he could only go all out. Of course, Qin Yu really did know his own limits. Thus, he didn't believe that he could rely on his own strength to fight the sea god. He still had to rely on White Ape. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu's feet fell, and his figure flashed, appearing beside White Ape. "Senior, how are you right now?" "Cough, cough, cough. Didn't I tell you to leave? Why are you still here?" White Ape coughed uncomfortably. He had an expression on his face that said, "You brat, you really are disobedient." Qin Yu choked. He thought, how could you not know why I'm still here? Pretending to be ignorant was a bad habit that couldn't be tolerated. But at this time, how could he care about such things? Qin Yu went straight to the point. "Senior, let's join forces to deal with it. Otherwise, none of us will live." White Ape looked up at Qin Yu. Although he didn't say anything, the meaning in his eyes was clear. "You brat, you aren't enough." There was no way to refute this. Qin Yu hurriedly said, "Senior White Ape, I am not joking. This is our last chance." He leapt onto White Ape's shoulder, his eyes locked onto the black clouds that swept towards them. In Qin Yu's eyes, after these tumbling clouds were dispelled of all external appearances, they had turned into pure tides of energy. They surged endlessly, releasing a formidable might. But since they were tides of energy, there were ebb and flow changes. And the moment these changes occurred was when they were at their weakest. "Senior White Ape, this direction is going to release all of your strength." White Ape didn't know where Qin Yu's confidence came from. He looked up and saw a dark golden light flash in the depths of Qin Yu's eyes. His heart chilled and a trace of awe gushed out. He instinctively obeyed Qin Yu's words and punched towards where Qin Yu was pointing. Dong! It was like a great drum had been struck, emitting a completely different sound. The raging black clouds seemed to pause for a moment, turning into a massive mass of seawater that splashed into the sea. The sea god hidden within roared in pain. One of its giant eyes instantly swelled up, leaving only a slit. It glared at Qin Yu with a venomous light. "This is..." White Ape's heart shook. As he looked at the pained sea god, his thoughts fell into chaos. At this moment, all the questions in his heart, like a fog that had been swept away by a strong wind, suddenly became clear. No wonder the sea god had suddenly gone berserk today. He didn't even care about his own life, to rush towards Starfall Archipelago. So its true goal was that brat Qin Yu. In other words, the reason this old man was being ruthlessly hammered was because he was suffering for him. White Ape should have been angry, but he discovered that he wasn't angry at all. In fact, he even felt a bit smug. That's right, he was smug. Although he didn't know how Qin Yu had done it. Looking at the current situation, his guess was most likely correct. This brat really had some heaven-defying dog's hit luck. If so, perhaps he could also bask in the light and wouldn't have to play along with the sea god. Moreover, he might even obtain an even greater lucky chance and be able to completely escape from his current half-dead predicament. "Senior White Ape, over here." Instantly regaining his composure, White Ape didn't hesitate. His body moved and boundless strength erupted, surging outwards like a tsunami. "Sea god, you can rely on the will of the heavens and earth to cheat, but I also have someone behind me. I want to see just how you die today." Roar! The sea god roared again and again. But, despite his great strength, he sadly discovered that he couldn't avoid White Ape's fist. It was like the moment this fist struck out, it had sealed off all escape routes. And White Ape's fist was aimed at the weakest point of its body. If it were struck, the consequences would be unimaginable. Without any other choice, the sea god drew back, curling up its body and using its thick skin to block White Ape's fist. Qin Yu's spirits rose. It was actually effective. Although his current strength was relatively small and weak, his field of vision was incomparably amazing. White Ape laughed. "Brother Qin, I will listen to your commands today. Just tell me what to do. After guessing Qin Yu's current status, White Ape didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Even calling him Brother Qin was like taking advantage of him. After all, he was... If this status were to be known by outsiders, supreme elders from all over the universe would gather together and attract Qin Yu to join them like a peacock fanning its feathers. Haha, one who survives a great calamity is destined for good fortune later on. That's what this old ape is talking about. Qin Yu didn't know that he had already exposed his cards. But whether they were brothers or not, it was fine as long as White Ape was happy. Senior White Ape, call me Big Brother, or you can call me Old White. Big Brother White, don't give the sea god any time to catch his breath. Strike his left front hoof. White Ape was overjoyed. Great. Just watch and see. Qin Yu had personally called him Big Brother White. Just these words alone were enough for this old ape to brag about for the rest of his life. In the future, once he raised his banner and wore the tiger skin on his body, I want to see just who would dare to talk to him about capturing him as a mount. Mount, I'll sit on your grandma's mount. As for this sea god in front of him, in White Ape's eyes, he wasn't even a problem at all, let alone the worlds while helping him cheat. Even if it rolled up its sleeves, it wouldn't fear him at all. Today, with this old ape here, no one could do anything to him. No matter what wind blew in the north or south, they had to obediently kneel down and lick him. Bang! A heaven-shaking explosion accompanied the sea god's enraged roar. This was clearly his strongest attack with his front hoof, but when it collided with White Ape's fist, it actually felt numb. The boundless strength within his body fell into chaos, and he was sent flying away. It was Qin Yu. The sea god's eyes locked onto him. He had already noticed that White Ape was only able to grasp his weakness by following his instructions. As he thought about why he had this ability, White Ape's eyes turned even redder. He couldn't continue like this. Although he had temporarily obtained the support of the world's will, he hadn't stopped dissipating. There wasn't much time left for him. He had to kill him first. Roar. The sea god reared back his head and roared. The sea below began to boil. Trillions of seawater shot up into the skies, raising the entire sea by several thousand feet. He wanted to use the impact of the seawater to separate Qin Yu and White Ape. White Ape roared. His white fur began to shine with a brilliant light, wrapping around him and Qin Yu. In the next moment, the wild seawater submerged them. As soon as they entered the sea, the surrounding undercurrents began to condense. They shot out like arrows, causing White Ape to tumble about. Even though seawater flooded his field of vision, Qin Yu could still clearly feel the sea god's position. But in White Ape's current state, he simply couldn't follow his instructions. Time slowly passed. The light emitting from White Ape's fur began to weaken. He had released the suppression of his injuries in exchange for a brief period of strength. Now, the hidden dangers were beginning to erupt. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to last much longer. Qin Yu took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them once more, there seemed to be vortexes spinning deep within them. Chapter 834. In the deep sea where undercurrents surged, a giant grinding stone suddenly appeared. It was over 1,000 feet wide and white, black, blue, red, and yellow swirled within. The edges of the grinding stone were a chaotic blue. The moment the grinding stone arrived, a boundless strength swept out, suppressing all of the turbulent currents and causing the surrounding area to calm down. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, his face pale. Blue veins popped up on the surface of his palms, but his fingertips remained steady, not trembling at all. After fusing with the jade egg, although his cultivation hadn't risen, Qin Yu hadn't gained anything. For instance, the 5-element mountain cultivation method that he cultivated could be perceived with just a thought, as if he had immersed himself in it for tens of millions of years and was thoroughly familiar with it. After comprehending the 5 elements, one could perceive the ultimate supernatural ability, the 5-element revolution. This was the giant grinding stone that appeared in the deep sea and suppressed the turbulent currents. This supernatural ability mainly suppressed and imprisoned. It used the power of the five elements as its foundation and covered all things in the world. As long as it belonged to the five elements, it wouldn't be able to struggle free. Of course, such a tyrannical and powerful supernatural ability wasn't without limits. Although it could suppress all things in the world, it still used Qin Yu's boundary as its foundation. If it weren't for the formidable strength gained from fusing with the jade egg, then with Qin Yu's current cultivation, it would have been impossible for him to suppress the sea god's strength. Now that he was barely able to do so, the strength within his body was like a broken dam. He absolutely wouldn't be able to last for long. Brother White, over there, attack. White Ape clenched his teeth. Just now he hadn't placed the sea god in his eyes at all, but now he had nearly failed miserably. Although Qin Yu called him Brother White now, that was mostly because he was forced by the situation. If he wanted to approach him and borrow his light to turn things around, he had to at least show that he had enough value. Brother Qin, rest assured that I won't give it another chance to be insolent. White Ape clenched his teeth. He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. Bang! Space shattered. A black stone staff howled out, falling into his palm. As if it had suddenly awakened, the surface of the black staff began to shine. Dark red lines flowed like magma, covering the surface of the black staff. Then they spread to White Ape's palm, causing him a howl in pain. The dark red vein pattern spread at an extremely fast speed. In a breath's time, they covered the entire White Ape's body. Its aura changed drastically as it panted heavily. Its eyes were scarlet red, and its entire body was filled with ruthlessness and destruction. It was as if it had turned into a demon. The strength that came from the black stone staff seemed to gather all the negative emotions in the world, wanting to destroy all things. But this strength didn't dare to approach Qin Yu, as if the fluctuations he emitted were like a god that couldn't be offended. Roar! The demonic White Ape reared its head back and roared. In the depths of its crimson eyes, it maintained the last trace of clarity. It lifted its hand and waved the black stone staff, smashing it down towards the direction Qin Yu pointed at. The seawater in front of him instantly boiled and then split into two. Crimson-black flames leaped about, burning fiercely in the deep sea, turning everything in its path into ashes. The sea god roared in pain. A long wound had been torn open on its huge body, and on the surface of its flesh, crimson-black flames were raging. Not only were these flames burning his body, but they were also directly affecting his soul, speeding up the process of sea god's destruction. The raging undercurrents around him dissipated. Qin Yu dispersed the five-element revolution, and the giant grinding stone vanished with it. He gasped for breath, a look of exhaustion on his face. But at this time, as his eyes fell on the White Ape, he couldn't help but frown. The strength of the stone staff didn't dare to approach him, but it wasn't polite at all to the White Ape. Qin Yu could see the crimson-black energy constantly invading the White Ape's body, gathering in its chest and fusing into its heart. When its heart was completely corroded, the White Ape would lose all reason and become a monster controlled by the stone staff, a monster that only knew how to destroy and kill. Originally, with the White Ape's strength, it should have been able to withstand the corrosion of the stone staff strength for a considerable period of time. But its heart had already been corroded once before today. Now that the stone staff strength invaded its body once more, the crimson-black energy entrenched in its heart erupted. The White Ape's heart began to rapidly transform into a crimson-black color. Its expression became increasingly pained, and the clarity in the depths of its eyes began to rapidly fade. In fact, the reason why the White Ape had fallen into such a distressed situation today was all because of this black stone staff. In a great battle in the past, the White Ape had finally won and seized the treasure. In its heavily wounded state, it had been invaded by the stone staff's strength, and its mind had nearly been stolen away, turning it into a puppet. Afterwards, it had been hunted down by its enemies. The White Ape had narrowly escaped death and escaped here, relying on the strength of the jade, annulus embryo egg to struggle at death's door. It was well aware that if it used the stone staff again, it wouldn't be able to resist its corrosion. But the white ape still chose to attack because this was its best chance. The white ape didn't hesitate to sacrifice itself to use the black stone staff to kill the sea god. Would Qin Yu just stare blankly on as its consciousness was annihilated? Rather than begging Qin Yu to attack, it might as well give him a reason to do so. Of course, this was still a gamble. It was a gamble that Qin Yu could save it. If it lost this gamble, then the white ape would truly be finished. But it still attacked. If Qin Yu obtained the mark, then the sky-piercing jade annulus would no longer exist. In other words, if it couldn't eliminate its hidden dangers, then sooner or later it would die. It might as well give it everything it had. Qin Yu's thoughts raced. A dark golden light flashed in his eyes as he looked at the surface of the stone staff. His vision blurred for a moment, and he felt as if he had fallen into a purgatory of magma. Red and black flames rose to the heavens. Black fog tumbled within, and a crimson eye appeared. It was filled with cruelty and madness as it stubbornly stared at Qin Yu. "I don't want to provoke you, so you had best not meddle in my business." Its roar echoed through the purgatory of magma. Qin Yu frowned for a moment before composing himself. "Since I appeared here, that means I've already decided to intervene. What do you want?" Bang! Magma tumbled and the red and black flames wildly rose. The black cloud roared in anger. "Don't think that just because you obtained the mark I won't attack you. With your current strength, you are nothing more than an ant to me." Qin Yu lightly said, "If you want to kill me, then feel free to do so. I want to see whether or not you have the courage to do so." The black cloud roared, "I can't kill you, but I can imprison your consciousness and make you stay here forever, never to leave again." Qin Yu remained expressionless. "Then you really are seeking death." He swept his eyes around, a dark golden light surging in the depths of his eyes. "Although I can't find your weakness right now, as long as I have enough time it won't be difficult at all. Since you know the existence of a mark, you should also know that I am not trying to scare you. Do you think you have lived for too long to keep me here?" The black cloud fell silent. Its crimson eyes flashed with an ominous light. It was clear that Qin Yu's words had poked at its sore spot. The black cloud could indeed kill Qin Yu, but once it did so, it absolutely wouldn't be able to escape. It would likely vanish into thin air, never to be able to transcend for all eternity. To it, that was the best possible result. It certainly wouldn't choose such a fate. It didn't dare to kill, and it didn't dare to imprison. Qin Yu had clearly indicated that he wanted to interfere, leaving it helpless. The black cloud didn't dare to remain silent for too long. It clenched its jaws and said, "Just what do you want to do?" Qin Yu said, "Simple. I can let you fuse with the white ape and allow you to seize its body, but the white ape's consciousness must be preserved." "That is impossible," the black cloud roared. Qin Yu looked at it, the dark golden light in his eyes brightening. "Believe me, you will agree." The black cloud agreed. It wasn't sure whether or not Qin Yu's words were true or false. Rather than perishing together, it might as well coexist. The white ape's eyes quickly brightened. It could clearly feel the changes within its body. After a moment of joy, it turned its head and said, "Brother Qin, thank you." Indeed, it had made the right bet. The consciousness hidden within the stone staff had communicated with it just now. The white ape that had escaped from its predicament felt as if the world had opened up to it. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. "Brother White, there is no need to thank me. You and I are comrades that fought side by side today, so I will naturally help you." The white ape knew what Qin Yu meant. It laughed. "Brother Qin, rest assured that I will blow apart the sea god." Lifting the stone staff, the white ape was in high spirits. The wild aura around its body began to rise at a horrifying speed. Rumble, rumble. Red and black flames surged out, rapidly spinning around it, turning into a giant vortex. Roar! The phantom of a demonic ape appeared in the skies. Its body was 100,000 feet high, as if it supported the heavens. Its red eyes locked onto the sea god. With a wave of its arm, the stone staff in its hands came crashing down. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. The sea god's massive body was sent flying backwards. Red flames rose up, wrapping around it and wildly burning it. I am not willing. I am not willing. The sea god roared again and again. Its pupils rapidly dilated, but even at this moment, its eyes were locked on Chinyu, filled with hatred. Pa! Like a bubble, the sea god's body suddenly burst. The raging red and black flames suddenly lost their target. After a brief pause, the flames were extinguished. The sea god that was born from the endless sea in accordance with the will of the heavens and earth vanished like smoke, without a trace left in the world. Ha ha ha! White Ape held his staff in one hand and placed his other hand on his waist. I have wandered the world unhindered and have never tasted defeat. So what if I am the incarnation of the will of the heavens and earth? If I say I want you to kneel, then you must kneel. The laughter suddenly stopped. Standing on White Ape's shoulder, Chinyu's complexion instantly turned dignified. He looked up into the skies above his head. There was nothing there, but the nearly tangible pressure that covered his body was coming from there. White Ape nearly slapped himself in the face. His mouth was just too smelly. Speak of the devil, and the devil will appear. What should he do now? If he were at his peak, White Ape wouldn't be afraid. At worst, he would just shatter space and leave this world. But the injuries he had suffered these past years had shaken his foundation. Without dozens of years, it would be impossible for him to recover. If he really had a fight with the will of the heavens and earth, he would absolutely have no choice but to kneel. Chinyu was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly said, "The essence of the sky-piercing jade annulus has been destroyed. All that is left is the strength for a single strike. At some point in time, I will completely destroy that space so that the flow of the heavens and earth's great Tao can return to the right path." The pressure from the skies slowed down a little, but it still hadn't dissipated. Chinyu thought for a moment. He glanced at White Ape and said, "White Ape has removed the hidden dangers in his body. Once his injuries are healed, he will leave this world. Before that, I guarantee that he will not casually attack and interfere with the balance of the world." Schwa. The pressure suddenly dispersed, as if it had never appeared. Chinyu let out a light breath. White Ape wiped a cold sweat from his forehead. "Brother Chin, it seems you have a way. If it were me, I fear I would have no choice but to brace myself and fight." Chinyu said, "Brother White, we can't defeat him." Then, he added in his heart, "At least not now." With a serious expression, he continued to say, "Brother White, you must not casually violate my promise. Otherwise, if the will of the heavens and earth descends once more, it won't give up so easily." White Ape nodded again and again. "Brother Chin, don't worry. I know how serious this is. I will absolutely not stir up any trouble." Chinyu smiled. "That's good." With a thought, the unconscious chicken overlord appeared. Before this, he had been helpless against its heart demon and could only think of borrowing the ice-soul jade bed to help it wake up. But now, to Chinyu, this little heart demon wasn't worth mentioning at all. He lifted a hand and pointed a finger between its eyes. There seemed to be a cracking sound in his ears, followed by a faint scream of hate, unwillingness, and resentment. Chinyu coldly snorted. He lifted his hand and grasped it. The scream disappeared, completely erased. White Ape revealed a look of envy. If he had been 90% sure before, then he no longer had any doubts now. Chinyu had absolutely obtained the mark. Only the legendary ability could be so simple as to easily and cleanly exterminate the invisible heart demon. The upright hardbone finally slumped down. Looking at how dispirited it was and how it had shrunk to less than a tenth of its original size, it could be seen that it had suffered a great loss this time. Thinking about it, it wouldn't be able to move for a long period of time. The chicken overlord slowly woke up. As it saw Chinyu, it was stunned. It lifted its wings and rubbed its eyes. Then, with a loud cry, it began to cry out in grief and indignation. "Chinyu, Chinyu, you finally come to save me. Let me tell you, I was originally having a wonderful dream about cultivation. But just as I was deep in it and couldn't extricate myself, a white-furred old monkey appeared. He was simply a demon, and in my dream, he brutally and inhumanely ravaged me. If my consciousness could record the torment I suffered, then what you see now would be me with cuts and bruises all over my body. That bastard white-furred old monkey. I absolutely won't give up. Chinyu, you will help me, right? You will definitely help me. I have a premonition that he isn't a character from a dream. Sooner or later, I will meet him. At that time, I will definitely let that white-furred old monkey know what it means to suffer so much that you wish you were dead, and what it means to take revenge for the smallest grievance. The chicken overlord's originally aggrieved face was now completely twisted. When it contrasted with its tear-streaked face, one couldn't help but think of a single word: freak. Chinyu was silent for a moment. He looked at the chicken overlord with pity in his eyes, and then looked at the pale-faced white ape behind it. White ape's eyes seemed to be spitting fire. There was no need to say anything else. He lightly coughed, interrupting the chicken overlord that seemed as if it would continue to ramble on. Look behind you first. The chicken overlord wasn't satisfied with being interrupted. It thought that Chinyu really wasn't good at understanding others. It frowned and turned its head. Ga. It was as if one could hear the sound of its teeth aching because it had used too much strength. Chapter 835. The chicken overlord howled in grief. It clung to Chinyu's thigh with its wings, but in the end it was carried away by the smiling white ape. That's right, it really was smiling. Its expression was indifferent, and the corners of its lips curved up in a mysterious smile. Facing such a mysterious smile, Chinyu's heart chilled. He watched as the white ape carried the chicken overlord away, silently mourning for the chicken overlord. However, the reason that the white ape gave him was sufficient and considerate. Chinyu had saved its life. As an old ape that knew how to repay favors, it had to repay him. It would be far too shameful to bring away such a useless junior like the chicken overlord. The white ape would help train it and then send it back to Chinyu's side. Thinking about it, Chinyu decided that there was no reason to refuse. He turned his head and looked at the Starfall archipelago that was only a tiny black dot in his line of sight. His eyes flashed. It's time to leave. Schwa. His figure moved, and he howled away. As for Dorlice, Old Lin, Yin Dai, and the others on the island, Chinyu wasn't worried. With Dorlice here, it would be easy to find him. All Chinyu needed to do was wait for them to catch up once he was a certain distance away. Starfall Archipelago had been saved. The Alliance had been saved. No one would have to die. Joyful moods echoed through the skies above the island. All the Alliance cultivators smiled, their expressions incomparably excited. But after the joy, the high-level figures of the Alliance began to feel apprehensive. The situation this time seemed to have gone a bit too far. No matter what the result was, the one in the sea had gone crazy for some reason and had nearly dragged Senior White Ape down with him. This was an indisputable fact, and Senior White Ape's appetite had always been very good. This time, he feared it would be even better. As the high-level figures of the Alliance thought about how the little wealth they had painstakingly accumulated was about to be torn away, they felt so pained they couldn't breathe. So sad, this wasn't the result they wanted, but if Senior White Ape hadn't managed to kill the sea god, then they would have been truly miserable. Of course, it wasn't that there weren't a few people who were wondering why that old bastard White Ape hadn't perished together with the sea god. That would have been the most perfect ending. But no one dared to reveal these thoughts in their minds. Otherwise, if White Ape were to find out what they were thinking, they would die. Douglas said in a deep voice, "This time, Senior White Ape has saved the entire Alliance. We will agree to any request. I'm sure no one has any objections. Then, let us first do something else." According to the messages from several elders in the mystic realm, the descendant of the Western Tomb's Qin family, Chinyu, has formed a resonance with the sky-split jade annulus. This is the only result of the Alliance's countless attempts in 100,000 years. Compared to the price that the Alliance will have to pay, I believe that this is far more important. So, find Qin Yu and bring him back to the Alliance. No matter what he wants or what requests he has, agree to them as long as they are reasonable. Invite him to become a member of the Alliance. Qin White. Alliance. Douglas said, his eyes. Spirit King. S. and you, he. And. He. The entire Alliance began to move. The entrance to the mystic realm was opened, and all the cultivators that entered were brought back. However, Qin Yu wasn't among them. Just like that, Qin Yu disappeared from the face of the earth. The high-level figures of the Beast Trainer Alliance immediately locked onto Qin Yu. They weren't stupid, so they immediately locked onto Qin Yu. Did Qin Yu have any companions when he entered the Alliance? Or who in the Alliance was closer to? Find these people and invite them to temporarily stay in the Alliance as guests. A sharp glint flashed across President Douglas' eyes. But once again, the Alliance elites missed. That's right, they were able to easily find Dorlice, Elder Lin, Yundai, and even the Shui sisters. But when he arrived, the house was already empty. When he followed the clues and found Su Hongyi, she shook her head and said that she did not know anything. Because of Dongfang Han's death and the Su family's background, the Alliance couldn't force her to speak. However, with so many people, they couldn't just leave quietly. The entire sea region was within the Alliance's sphere of influence. If they wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult to find the whereabouts of several people. As the Beast Trainer Alliance was preparing to move, White Ape rushed over with the listless chicken overlord in one hand. He bluntly warned, "Since you are about to give me a generous gift, I will warn you. You had best not try to find any traces of Qin Yu. Otherwise, a great disaster will befall you." Like this, the matter was dropped. Although they didn't know what White Ape was basing his judgment on, no one in the Alliance dared to take the risk. Because looking at Senior White Ape's appearance, if the Alliance insisted on doing this, he would immediately flip out. Once White Ape flipped out, that would also be a great disaster. White Ape opened the Beast Trainer Alliance's storeroom and dove in. Half a day later, he left in satisfaction, leaving behind the pale-faced, high-level figures of the Alliance. White Ape's original words were that it was fine to take half, but he gave them such important information today and also helped them avoid a great disaster. Taking 20% more wasn't excessive at all. What kind of important information was this? President Douglas's tall and sturdy body seemed to thin. His loose clothes fluttered in the wind, and he felt as if he were being hollowed out. On a ship heading towards the mainland, Dorlice and the others smoothly found Qin Yu. She made up a very reasonable explanation for this, but Qin Yu only chuckled in his heart. Dorlice carefully stared at Qin Yu's face and suddenly said, after entering the Alliance's mystic realm, "What did you do?" Qin Yu arched an eyebrow. "I didn't do anything." Dorlice sneered. "I would be an idiot to believe you. Tell me the truth. Was the reason the sea god went berserk because of you?" Qin Yu immediately denied everything. His expression was extremely solemn, as if he were absolutely innocent and hadn't done anything at all. This involved the sky-split jade wall and the embryo egg mark inheritance. No matter who asked, Qin Yu wouldn't say a single word. Dorlice had a solemn expression. "My intuition tells me that you are absolutely lying." Regarding this, Elder Lin expressed full approval. He looked at Qin Yu in front of him, a dignified look in his eyes. Qin Yu stood in front of him, but if he closed his eyes, he wouldn't be able to feel his aura at all. It was like he was an illusory shadow, and all of these changes occurred after Qin Yu entered the mystic realm. Although he didn't dare say that the sea god going berserk was related to Qin Yu, he was absolutely involved. Otherwise, why would such changes occur? This Qin Yu was truly mysterious. Perhaps he should remind his master to be more cautious around him in order to avoid any accidents. Thus, the matter was left unsettled. Since Qin Yu decided to hide it, no one would be able to detect it. Even if they suspected him, it was meaningless without evidence. Dorlice angrily coughed and left. But before she left, she glared at Qin Yu and sneered. "Don't be so smug just yet." Qin Yu soon understood her meaning. He looked at the Shui family sisters standing in front of him with nervous expressions and rubbed his temples. He suddenly felt that this action might cause the two sisters to overthink things. Qingyu put down his hand and asked, "What are your plans?" Shui Qingqing fiercely looked up, her eyes wide as she stared at Qingyu. She bit her lips, and her face paled like a frightened little beast. Shui Ye pulled on her little sister's hand and forced herself to remain calm. She said, "Big brother Qin, once we reach the shore, we can walk by ourselves. We thank you for taking care of us these past days. We sisters will always remember this in our hearts." Qingyu was silent for a moment. Then he slowly said, "Don't think too much about it. Since you appeared here, I will definitely make arrangements for you. But I still have important matters to attend to right now. There might be dangers, so it isn't suitable for you to stay by my side. So, if you have a place you want to go, I can send you there. Otherwise, leave it to me to make arrangements." Shui Qingqing's eyes turned red. "Big brother Qin, we have nowhere else to go." Shui Ye pursed her lips. She knew that with Qin Yu's personality, since he was so straightforward, he didn't want to be entangled with them. There was no chance for them to stay by his side. Having a safe place to stay was the best result for the two sisters. "I will follow Big Brother Qin's arrangements." Qin Yu's thoughts raced. With his current status, whether it was the Dark Parliament or the Western Tomb Divine Church, it would be easy for him to arrange things for the Shui family sisters. But between him and these two sides, the most he could do was feign civility and use each other. If he sent the Shui family sisters there, he might be able to obtain a moment of peace, but he feared he would harm them in the end. As for Qin Yu, he owed them a favor. If it weren't for the Dao monarch's blood that the Shui family sisters had given him, Qin Yu feared he wouldn't have had the chance to fuse with the embryo, and the result could be imagined. This could be considered an indirect, life-saving grace. Although Qin Yu had saved the Shui family sisters more than once, something like grace couldn't be calculated in terms of the number of times. From this point of view, Qin Yu believed that he had to make appropriate arrangements for them. After considering it again and again, Qin Yu thought of Dragon City. First, because of the ancient's consciousness, the Dragon Soul would be allies for a short period of time. And there was also the Shadow Clan in Dragon City, and Zhou was there. With her temperament, if she knew that Qin Yu had arranged for the Shui family sisters to come here, she would definitely look after them. With these two layers of protection, the Shui family sisters' safety wouldn't be a problem. As for more, such as whether or not the Shui family sisters wanted to go and whether or not they could adapt to life in Dragon City, Qin Yu couldn't consider these things. "Now, I have a choice here." A moment later, the Shui family sisters earnestly bowed and bid their farewells. They agreed to go to Dragon City and didn't show any objections. Qin Yu felt that it was best to be more dependable with such tactful people. He didn't feel comfortable with Senior Lin participating, but he also didn't want to make a trip to Dragon City. If he encountered Zhou Li, it would only be awkward. Thus, he had Dorlice make the trip. She was strong enough, and she had clearly become more annoying recently. If she left for a period of time, she would be able to have some peace and quiet. Qin Yu knocked on Dorlice's cabin door. It was unknown what they spoke about, but when Qin Yu left feeling refreshed, Dorlice's face was so gloomy that it seemed as if it would drip water. But in the end, she still agreed to send the Shui family sisters to Dragon City. The ship temporarily stopped at a supply island. Qin Yu saw the Shui family sisters off and cupped his hands together. "We'll meet again someday." Shui Qingqing opened her mouth. Big brother Qin. She had many words to say, but she couldn't say a single one. Shui Ye grabbed her hand. "Big brother Qin, we bid our farewells." Dorlice curled her lips. Even a blind person could see the friendship in these two little girls' eyes. Yet, this brat Qin Yu wasn't moved at all. How heartless. Let's go, let's go. We still have a long way to go. Let's hurry and change ships." They boarded a ship in another direction. Even after they were far away, Qin Yu could still see the two women waving at him from the deck. Yundai quietly said, "Teacher, you are far too popular. This makes this disciple feel a great pressure." Qin Yu lifted a hand and rapped her on the head. "What nonsense! Let's go." He turned and boarded the ship. Some people, some feelings were destined to miss each other. His heart was already full, and he didn't have time to care about anything else. He hoped that they would be well in the future. Chapter 836. After sending off the Shuai sisters, one of his worries had been lifted. Qin Yu sat on the deck, quietly looking at the sea and sky in front of him. Waves tumbled about, reflecting the deep blue sky, accompanied by the gentle sea breeze. It was a rare sight of tranquility and tranquility. Yindai thought for a moment. She moved a chair to the side and placed it down. "Teacher, can I sit here?" Without waiting for Qin Yu to respond, she turned and sat down. Then, she casually stretched her waist, outlining her soft and beautiful curves. After becoming familiar with her teacher's character and with the idea of seducing him, her respect for Qin Yu didn't diminish, but the fear in her heart had mostly faded. Qin Yu shook his head and closed his eyes. "You've already sat down. Can I let you leave?" Hearing the helplessness in his voice, Yin Dai giggled. "Of course I won't leave. And I don't think teacher would do such a thing." Qin Yu didn't respond. Yin Dai didn't care. She leaned back in her chair, feeling incomparably at ease. The feeling of staying by her teacher's side was really good. After a moment, Yin Dai spoke up once more. "The sea is too quiet today. It's like I'm on the surface of a tranquil lake." With his eyes closed, Qin Yu frowned. "What did you say?" Yin Dai blinked. "I said that the sea is really quiet, the last part. It's like I'm on the surface of a tranquil lake." Qin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the tranquil sea in front of him and gradually frowned. "Dorlice," he whispered and took a step forward. "Wait here." Before his voice fell, Qin Yu had already flown out of the ship. As his feet fell, the tranquil mirror-like space suddenly shattered, revealing a gap. The sky inside was dark, and waves surged. One could clearly hear the angry roar of the sea. As Qin Yu entered, the gap vanished from sight. Shua, Senior Lin appeared in front of Yin Dai. He asked in a low voice, "What happened? Where did Mr. go?" Yin Dai opened her mouth. "I don't know." She was still in a daze. Qin Yu stepped out of the mirror world. As he left the constructed scene, he saw what was happening above the sea. Violent winds howled without end, sweeping up endless waves that soared into the sky and rained down with a rumbling sound, as if a torrential rain was pouring down. Looking up through the waves, Qin Yu could clearly feel chaotic auras coming from that direction. One of them was Dorlice. On the other side, the ones that were frantically besieging her were the giant spirit clan. Whoosh! Qin Yu instantly accelerated. The air screeched as he raced away. The sturdy ship sailed on the turbulent sea, emitting ear-piercing screeches. If it weren't for the fact that the two sides were fighting each other, the ship would have already disintegrated and been swallowed by the rolling black seawater. The Shuai sisters hid in the ship's hold, their faces pale as they looked at the two sides fighting above the ship. When the group of cultivators from the giant spirit clan appeared, their first thought was that they were coming for them. However, they soon discovered that this was not the case. The goal of these giants was Dorlice, and it was only at this moment that the Shuai sisters realized just how terrifying Dorlice was. Even when fighting against so many, she didn't fall into a disadvantage at all. In fact, the feeling she gave off at this moment was that everything was under her control. Transparent and bright holy light carried with it a burning hot aura. All of the giant spirit clan cultivators that rushed towards her were forced back. Moreover, as time passed, they discovered to their horror that their strength was being suppressed and that it was constantly fading away. In the skies above their heads, holy light constantly gathered. It nearly condensed into essence and emitted a horrifying aura. This feeling was like a mountain falling on their chests, making it hard for them to breathe. This woman was actually so strong, and yet she was willing to follow by Qin Yu's side. Then his true strength. It turns out that Big Brother Qin is fiercer than we thought. This misunderstanding caused Qin Yu's status in the hearts of the Shuai sisters to rapidly rise. However, they soon discovered that their understanding of Qin Yu's position wasn't as accurate as before. "We can't kill her, we have to retreat." A giant spirit clan cultivator roared out. He lifted his hand and punched out, shattering the holy light. But the fragments of holy light still tore open large wounds on his body. The giant spirit clan cultivator frowned. He stomped his feet and turned to leave. Dorlise had an indifferent expression and her eyes were icy cold. You remnant of the giant spirit clan, you dare to appear in front of me on your own initiative, all of you will die. Bang! Endless holy light burned above her head. The temperature between the heavens and earth crazily soared, and the seawater below began to boil. At this time, Dorlise suddenly furrowed her eyebrows. She lifted her hand, and the burning holy light split into several pieces, each of them rapidly collapsing and contracting, condensing into blazing meteors that came crashing down. Every holy light meteor locked onto a large number of giant spirit clan cultivators, suppressing their auras. Besides resisting them head-on, there was no other way. The giant spirit clan cultivators that were locked onto revealed looks of despair. They suddenly realized that killing Dorlise after receiving the message was an incomparably wrong decision. Hum. Space suddenly shook, turning into sticky mud that wrapped around the falling holy light meteors. They rapidly slowed down until they finally came to a complete stop. The giant spirit clan cultivators that had just escaped death looked up at the approaching holy light meteors, their hearts filled with panic. They were certain that if they allowed these meteors to fall, everyone in the giant spirit clan would die without a grave. Dorellis's eyes brightened before returning to tranquility. She turned around, her face filled with grievance. Chinyu, they came to kill me on their own initiative. Do you still want to stop them? Chinyu had no expression. No wonder you suddenly agreed to send them to Dragon City. You should have already sensed the aura of the giant spirit clan cultivators. Dorlise met his gaze and didn't deny it. She curled her lips and said, I didn't ask them to kill me. Chinyu said, I guarantee that the giant spirit clan won't attack you again in the future. Let them go. Dorellis' eyebrows arched up. Chinyu, I already gave you face once. Then I'll give it again. Don't go too far. Dorlise had a fierce expression. Chinyu no longer looked at her. He flicked his sleeves, and space fluctuated. All of the burning holy light meteors were slowly swallowed up. His eyes swept over the giant spirit clan cultivators. After a moment of silence, he said, For countless years, the giant spirit clan has paid a great price. Now, you can let go and return to where you live in peace. Quietly wait for the arrival of a new era and welcome the rebirth of your people. Believe me, that day won't be too far away. Who are you? Why did you save us? A tall giant spirit clan cultivator asked. Patriarch, it was this lord who saved us in Vasti City. Several giant spirit clan cultivators stood up and nodded towards Chinyu with gratitude. Hong Zhao took a deep breath. She loudly said, After the High Ancestor and the others were killed, it was this lord who brought us out of the yellow sand world. If it weren't for him, we would have already died. She respectfully bowed. The current patriarch's complexion changed. He bowed and said, Thank you for helping my giant spirit clan several times. He straightened himself and said, But ever since my clan was born, we have shouldered a mission that we could not shirk. We can only thank you for your good intentions. Chinyu furrowed his eyebrows. His aura suddenly changed like a great beast awakening. A vast and ancient aura of time spread out, covering all the giant spirit clan cultivators. This dual suppression came from the bloodline and the soul, causing the complexions of the giant spirit clan cultivators to change. They involuntarily fell to the ground, their hearts filled with submission. This is the current patriarch's eyes widened. His body shivered with excitement. Hong Zhao was the only giant spirit clan cultivator who could still look up at Chinyu. She could feel his aura, and her face flushed red. Chinyu slowly said, In the yellow sand world, I have smoothly revived and returned. The giant spirit clan's mission has been completed. All of you can follow my orders. Hong Zhao's tears flowed down. So the High Ancestor and the others hadn't died in vain. They had exhausted their lives to help their master revive. The current patriarch deeply bowed. Yes, master. Qin Yu was well aware that as long as he wanted to, he could easily obtain the loyalty of the giant spirit clan and have them do anything for him. But at the level that Qin Yu had touched upon, even if the giant spirit clan used all of their strength, they would still be as fragile as a bubble that could be easily destroyed. If so, then he might as well release them and return the freedom of this sad clan. The giant spirit clan left, their hearts filled with endless joy and longing. The mission of their clan's inheritance had been completed, and they no longer needed to shoulder such a heavy burden. When their masters stood at the peak of the world once more, they would no longer need to hide and live like they did now. They would be able to walk under the sun with dignity and dignity. The Shui sisters were crowded around as they boarded the giant spirit clan's hidden ship at the bottom of the sea. Since something like the giant spirit clan had happened, there was no meaning in going to Dragon City. The giant spirit clan's territory was the safest. Even now, their hearts were shaken. They never imagined that Big Brother Qin would be able to hide himself so deeply. Just who was he? Shui Qingqing bit her lips. The hope in her eyes slowly extinguished before finally returning to silence. Seeing all of this, Shui Ye reached out a hand and squeezed her palm. She said in a soft voice, "Silly girl, how come you still don't understand? Big Brother Qin is a divine dragon that soars through the highest heavens. He isn't someone we can think about. To be able to get to know him and spend some time with him is already our greatest stroke of luck. Otherwise, we would already be dead by now." Shui Qingqing was silent for a moment. She wiped her eyes and said, "I understand, big sister." She revealed a smile. "I won't have any other thoughts, but I will remember Big Brother Qin for the rest of my life." Shui Ye traced her hair and sighed inwardly. Wasn't she the same? It was just that she didn't have the courage to say it out loud like this silly girl. "Big Brother Qin, if we never meet again, then I wish you a safe and peaceful life." Qin Yu didn't know that in the distance, on a ship sailing through the sea, there were two women silently wishing him well in their hearts. But he was well aware that he wouldn't be able to rest in peace for some time. This was because Dorlice had snuck into his room in the middle of the night. And most importantly, this woman was wearing skimpy clothes. It was appropriate to say that she was ragged or barely clothed. Dorlice stared at Qin Yu and lowered her voice. "You've already ruined my plans twice. Tell me, how do you plan on compensating me?" She licked her lips. "If you don't have any ideas, perhaps I can give you a suggestion. How about you repay a debt of gratitude with your body?" Qin Yu rubbed his temples. "Have you gone crazy this time? If there's nothing else, then hurry up and go back to sleep." Dorlice sneered. "Do you know that in this situation, speaking like this to a woman is the greatest disrespect?" Chapter 837. Dorlice pulled out a chair and sat down. Her expression was icy cold, and her aura was overwhelming. "I've already given you the suggestion. If you don't want to, then come up with another plan. I will definitely accept this favor today." Her cold words combined with her expressionless face really caused the pressure to multiply. But was it appropriate for her to be dressed so thinly at this time? Qin Yu moved to the side to avoid eye contact. This was because he was worried that if he looked over, he would be able to see everything under Dorlice's skirt. This woman's sitting posture was far too overbearing. He had no choice but to avoid it. "Dorlice." Qin Yu paused for a moment. His tone relaxed a great deal. "Sit down first and put on some clothes. If there is anything, we can sit down and slowly discuss it." Dorlice blinked, a bit surprised. She looked at Qin Yu, a look of suspicion on her face. "Are you really willing to talk to me?" Qin Yu nodded. "I am." "Then tell me, do you agree to pay with your body?" Qin Yu bitterly smiled. "Dorlice, you are beautiful to begin with, and the body you are borrowing now is also beautiful and alluring. As for me, I am a normal man. It's just that today was too sudden. Can you give me an explanation?" Dorlice's eyebrows arched up. "Turn around and I will tell you." Qin Yu was silent for a moment and then slowly turned around. He tried his best to not look sideways, but he still accidentally saw something he shouldn't have seen. This woman, she was actually playing in a vacuum. Qin Yu's mind buzzed as he fell into chaos. He really couldn't figure out just what Dorlise was thinking. Even if she was extremely hungry and thirsty, it shouldn't have suddenly erupted to such a degree, right? Her eyes swept over Qin Yu's face, and she charmingly smiled. Do I look good? Do you want me to come over so you can see me more clearly? Qin Yu coughed. You still haven't given me an explanation. Dorellis' eyebrows arched up. It's such a simple matter. Today, when you released the giant spirit, your manly aura burst forth and immediately captured the passionate heart of others. They couldn't help but want to eat you up. Are you satisfied with this answer? Qin Yu was so angry that he almost laughed. Satisfied my ass. If I really believed your nonsense, then I would be the fool. But at this time, he couldn't lay all his cards on the table. Just now, he had felt fluctuations coming from the ancient's consciousness. It was very well hidden. If it wasn't for the fact that he had fused with the jade wall embryo egg, which made his entire body as transparent as jade, he wouldn't have been able to detect it at all. Qin Yu instantly understood what the ancient's goal was. He wanted to probe and see whether or not Qin Yu was still under his control. Thinking about it, it was because after fusing with the jade egg, Qin Yu's aura had changed, causing the ancient to have some sort of scruples. Thus, Qin Yu had to act as if he didn't know anything about the arrival of the ancient consciousness. He even had to cooperate with him and give him a chance to verify his suspicions. For instance, if he was suddenly interrupted when the man and woman were burning with passion, if you still don't believe me, then you're awesome. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, he remained silent. Across from him, Dorlise began to move. Although her intuition told her that Qin Yu was acting a bit strange today, how could she miss such a great opportunity? After fusing with the jade egg, not only was the ancient able to feel it, but Dorlise could also feel the inexplicable changes in Qin Yu's body. Moreover, because she was at his side, this feeling was even clearer. She suddenly felt that the contingency plan she left in Qin Yu's body was no longer foolproof. She had to reinforce it a second time. The method of reinforcement was simple. As long as Qin Yu couldn't hold himself back and fuse together with the body she controlled, then this boy absolutely wouldn't be able to overturn the heavens in the future. No matter what he did, he could only obediently be a puppet in her hands. She closed in 2 or 3 steps. Her hands reached out, and Qin Yu immediately felt a surging sense of oppression. Damn, this was definitely the real deal. It would definitely feel good to the touch. Steady, don't think about it. Don't think about it. Dorlise moved closer to his ear. She let out a deep breath and said, Do you want to touch it? Really, I don't mind at all. Qin Yu could feel the fluctuations coming from the ancient's consciousness. It was clear that at this time, the ancient was carefully observing him. Qin Yu secretly clenched his teeth and wrapped his arms around Dorellis' waist. Her tentacles were as soft as he expected. With a light cry, Dorlise felt as if all her bones had been pulled out. She softly leaned against Qin Yu. Her breathing became short and deep. She tightened her grip around Qin Yu's neck, as if she wanted to rub her entire body into his. At the same time, the aura that Dorlise emitted had a hint of sweetness to it. It was like mellow wine, causing one's heart to beat faster and their faces to flush red. It was like a flame hidden in the depths of their hearts was ignited. Qin Yu secretly grinned. He didn't think that this woman would actually be hiding such a card. Her methods of seducing the heart were quite sharp. If it were anyone else, or if their will wasn't firm enough, then even if they had other thoughts, they might have turned this fake play into reality. Damn it, the ancient didn't seem to have any intention of interfering at all. Did he have a hobby of watching live pornography? If that really was the case, then there was nothing Qin Yu could do. Acting to this step had nearly reached his limit. To ride on a horse and look down on everyone with disdain, that was absolutely impossible. The arms around his neck moved downwards. Qin Yu stiffened. Just as he was about to tear away all pretense of cordiality and do whatever he wanted, a fluctuation of strength suddenly erupted and sent Dorlise flying away. Dorlise had been in a daze just a moment ago, and her face was flushed red. But in the blink of an eye, she regained her clarity of mind. Her eyes locked on Yu, or to be more precise, they passed through his body and met the distant ancient's gaze. After several breaths of time, she lifted a hand and yawned. She lazily stood up and said, "What a disappointment. Yu, it looks like this is all we can do today. We will have many more chances in the future." She tossed him a coquettish glance and then gracefully left. Yu revealed an awkward expression. Hidden deep in his eyes was a perfectly timed anger. This was the perfect expression of his emotions. The ancient's voice sounded out in his mind. "I know that with your current age, you still haven't put down the matters between men and women. But you absolutely cannot touch a woman like Dorlise. Otherwise, there will be no end to your troubles. Do you understand?" Yu's embarrassment deepened. He bowed his head and cupped his hands together. "Yes, I will remember." There was a bit of unwillingness in his voice, but it was also because of this that he seemed even more normal. After all, facing an incomparably beautiful woman like Dorlise who had clearly expressed her willingness to let him have a taste of her body, any normal man would feel a bit unwilling if they were stopped. And Yu had been just a tiny bit away from succeeding. The ancient lightly said, "You will know in the future that I am doing this for your own good." After a pause, it continued to say, "I have already made my preparations. Do not delay any further and return to Sky Declaring Pavilion as soon as possible." Schwa, the consciousness scattered. As for what Yu experienced in the Beast Trainer Alliance, he didn't ask a single question. Perhaps it was because the ancient believed that everything was under his control, or perhaps he had a premonition that even if he asked, he wouldn't obtain any harvests. Yu closed his eyes and sensed his surroundings. After determining that the ancient had truly left, he let out a light breath, a dignified expression on his face. It was only at this moment, after facing the true world, that he truly felt just how powerful the ancient consciousness was. No wonder he dared to fake his death, and even dared to abandon his mortal body to scheme against the Tao monarch in order to avoid the calamity of the ancient race. So it was because he had such great confidence. Yu rejoiced in his heart. If it weren't for a lucky chance that allowed him to fuse with the jade embryo egg, then even if the ancient's heart was truly in his control, he feared he still wouldn't have been able to escape death in the end. As for Dorlise, this woman had likely underestimated the true strength of the ancient's consciousness. If she competed with him on the Tao monarch's great Tao, there was no chance at all. But soon, Yu discovered that he had underestimated Dorlise a bit. There was a knock on the door once more. A neatly dressed Dorlise stood outside. She met Yu's eyes and directly said, "Has the ancient's consciousness left?" Yu frowned. Dorlise lightly said, "Don't worry, I didn't use any methods to monitor you. It was just that your reaction, just now, was too abnormal." Yu was silent for a moment. "You already sensed it?" Dorlise said, "It wasn't too early, but I wasn't as stupid as you think I was." She swept her eyes over him. "Looking at your current state, you should have smoothly passed. Do you want to celebrate? For instance, we can continue what we were doing just now." She blinked. "I don't mind at all. In fact, I'm even looking forward to it in my heart." Yu bitterly smiled. "Since you know the inside story, don't mess around." Dorlise looked at him. She suddenly said, "Yu, you are absolutely hiding something. Yu, with your cautious temperament, if you didn't have absolute confidence that our conversation wouldn't be discovered, why would you dare to speak with me here? You have to know that I reminded you before that the ancient's consciousness can sense what is happening around you." Yu bitterly smiled. Indeed, looking down on a woman was a very stupid thing to do. Dorlise might have underestimated the strength of the ancient's consciousness, but her intelligence wasn't low. Moreover, for him to make such a big mistake and not realize Dorlis's goal, it was clear that his mind had been thrown into confusion by what happened just now. Indeed, men were creatures. No matter how calm their hearts were or how clear their thoughts were, when they faced a beautiful woman, their sensitivity would be greatly reduced. Impulses and desires would even affect their minds for a short period of time. This was a lesson he had to remember. Dorlise smiled. "Yu, aren't you reflecting on your actions now? Let me tell you, Don't waste your energy. To a man, it is impossible to guard against a woman's tricks. All right, since you have no intention of continuing our fate, I will go back and rest. Of course, if you can figure it out, you are welcome to come over at any time. My door isn't locked. Turning around, the smile on Dorelis's face faded and a cold intent appeared in her eyes. She had indeed guessed that Qin Yu was using her to numb the ancient's consciousness. Moreover, she had used this chance to determine that there were other secrets hidden on Qin Yu's body. But in fact, Dorelis didn't obtain any harvests. Instead, this made her even more certain that the card she left on Qin Yu's body might not be of absolute use. In other words, if she couldn't reinforce it, it was likely that Qin Yu would escape her control in the future. But this boy was slippery, and it was clear he had scruples about her. If she wanted to pull him into bed with her, it would be a bit difficult. Should she detonate her card now and forcefully control Qin Yu to force him to submit? Or should she wait a little longer and look for the next opportunity? Dorelis fell into deep thought. After watching her vanish around the corner, Qin Yu returned to his room and closed the door. His expression became indifferent. During their conversation just now, the runes hidden within the ancient's heart in his chest had emitted a strange fluctuation. It was clear that Dorelis had some other thoughts. Chapter 838. Half a month later, Qin Yu's group of 4 returned to Sky Declaring Pavilion. Senior Lin immediately bid his farewells and left. Without any delay, he entered the chamber, and after determining that he wasn't being monitored, he opened the communication array formation. In the golden basin in front of him, ripples appeared on the still water surface. Then, a blurry face appeared. Shua, this face opened its eyes. They were calm, like the water of an ancient icy spring, emitting a cold chill that reached deep into the soul. What happened? As the water rippled, a calm voice sounded out in the chamber. Senior Lin bowed, his voice extremely respectful. Reporting to Master, I followed Ning Qin to the Beast Trainer Alliance. Immediately, he briefly explained what happened. But he gave an extremely detailed description of the changes that occurred to Qin Yu's body. Master, Ning Qin's origins are mysterious, and his background is beyond what you can see. This old servant earnestly asks Master to consider this carefully and act cautiously. If Master agrees, this old servant can't think of a way to probe him. The face in the water ripples said, I already understand what you are saying. There is no need to probe him any further. Bring him here as soon as possible. Senior Lin was startled. He immediately bowed, Yes, Master. Shua, the face vanished from sight. The basin instantly returned to tranquility without a single ripple. Senior Lin straightened his body. His eyebrows relaxed, and a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. With his master's temperament, since he made such arrangements, he must have complete confidence in himself. If so, then he wouldn't need to worry too much. In a quiet chamber far away, a round hole was opened in the ceiling. A foot-wide beam of light shined down from it, shining brightly and reaching the ground. But the light that shined through the hole didn't spread out at all. It only left behind a foot-wide dot on the ground. Everything outside was pitch black. It was thick like ink, so thick that it couldn't be dissolved. It seemed as if one looked at it, they would be swallowed up. Suddenly, a man's calm voice echoed out from the darkness. Ning Qin has returned to Mid-Morning City. I have already ordered people to bring him here as soon as possible. After a brief silence, the darkness responded, You must be careful of this person. Although his cultivation is weak, I still feel a trace of fear towards him. Of course, I won't be careless against someone who you treat with caution. Now that I think about it, although Master was powerful, he was a failure in his life. Everyone around him that he could trust chose to betray him in the end. I have to say that this is a kind of tragedy. Shut up. Don't be rude to Master. The voice on the other side was icy cold, and every word was filled with killing intent. No matter what, it was Master who gave us life. This will never change. I don't want to hear such disrespectful words a second time. Do you understand? Since you don't want to hear it, then I won't say it. Anyway, compared to action, words are really pale and powerless. The first voice that sounded was very calm, without the slightest bit of anger for being scolded. He smiled and said, "Let's go and make the final preparations to welcome the arrival of our master." Chinyu and old Lin spoke in private for some time. Then he stood up and saw him off. He returned to the living room and sat down on the sofa. He rubbed his chin. Although old Lin's statement, just now, was a bit vague, Chinyu was still able to capture his true meaning. The master of Sky Declaring Pavilion was anxious and hoped that he could finish his preparations as soon as possible. This was in line with the ancient's request, but he didn't immediately agree. Rather, he thought of a way to delay it for the time being. Dorlice and Yundai walked into the living room. Dorlice looked over Chinyu and suddenly said, "Chinyu, what bad idea do you have now?" "Chinyu, what kind of eyes did this woman have? Weren't they a bit too good? If she didn't take care of her eyesight, she might end up with cataracts in the future." Chinyu lightly coughed and didn't look at her. He turned to Yundai and smiled. "During this period of time, you've been diligently cultivating. I don't have much to help you with, so I'll give you some things you need to cultivate. Yundai, make a list as soon as possible. There's no need to save anything for me. I will do my best to satisfy your requests." That's right. Chinyu was prepared to fleece them one last time. Once the ancient got rid of the myriad dragon body, who knew what the situation would become, he might as well take advantage of this opportunity to make some money. Dorlice blinked. "Count me in." Chinyu didn't even look at her. "What the hell? You haven't done anything at all, and you want to take a piece of the pie? Are you dreaming? And most importantly, why would I give you any benefits? So that you can recover more strength and become more formidable, so that you can make things difficult for me? Haha, I'm not that stupid. Even if you beat me to death, I wouldn't do something like supporting an enemy." In the end, Dorlice stomped her feet in anger. But she wasn't able to change Chinyu's mind. She could faintly guess what Chinyu was thinking, but she clenched her teeth and endured it. "Surname Chin, just you wait. Once this old lady takes control of the situation in the future, I will make sure you drink the water I wash my feet with every day." The next 2 days were quiet and peaceful. Just as old Lin was wondering whether or not his words were too vague and Chin didn't understand the deeper meaning behind them, the pale-faced Bien Chongli from the Internal Affairs Division arrived at his residence. With a trembling hand, he handed him a jade slip list. "Old Lin, this is the purchase list that Mr. Ning Qin submitted today. I cannot make the decision myself, so I ask that you decide for me." As Bien Chongli spoke, he couldn't help but gulp. Beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. Although old Lin had already guessed from his expression that the contents of this purchase list would be astonishing, when he opened it and looked at it for himself, he still couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air and nearly flipped the table. "Too much. Ning Qin, you have gone too far. You have already done something similar before. I originally thought that your greed was already very strong, but I never thought I would underestimate you. So it turns out that your mouth can be opened so wide." Bien Chongli scowled. "Old Lin, you cannot let go this time. Otherwise, even if you empty out the entire Mid-Morning City Branch Division, it still won't be enough. You must solemnly declare to the Tower Master that you must severely crack down on this type of extortion and embezzlement." Old Lin took a deep breath and stabilized his blood pressure. He coldly said, "I will immediately contact the Master." He turned and left. A moment later, Bien Chongli left the courtyard in a daze. He first rubbed his forehead and then looked up at the sun. "I don't have a fever, it's daytime, and I'm not dreaming. So why did the Tower Master agree?" The entire Sky Declaring Pavilion was operating at full capacity, mobilizing a massive amount of materials and wealth. They didn't hesitate to pay any price to purchase and trade precious treasures. The entire world was shocked. No one knew just what they were doing that would cause such a massive movement. Countless secret agents swarmed over. The hidden agents buried within Sky Declaring Pavilion were also activated in an attempt to find out what was going on. But regarding this matter, Sky Declaring Pavilion was clearly prepared and had prepared a foolproof method to deal with it. None of them were able to obtain any useful information. But there were some people that didn't need any investigation or evidence to determine just what was going on with this massive turmoil. For instance, Fengqing. The movement of materials within Sky Declaring Pavilion naturally couldn't be concealed from her. In front of others, she appeared calm and steady, handling everything in an orderly manner. But as she lay on her bed in the dark of night, fear swallowed her up like the darkness around her. Fear, restlessness, anxiety, and even despair. All sorts of emotions wove together in her heart, colliding with each other. But Fengqing didn't dare to reveal any of them. No matter how close she was to her maids or confidants, she couldn't reveal even half a word. Fengqing was waiting. She was waiting for a reasonable opportunity. Before then, she couldn't reveal anything wrong, otherwise a great disaster would befall her. On the 7th day of recklessly purchasing precious materials, Fengqing finally found such an opportunity. She would personally deliver a batch of materials to the lakeside courtyard. But what left Fengqing in despair was that when she arrived at the lakeside courtyard, old Lin was already waiting for her. He calmly bowed and said, "Miss, you can leave these matters to this old servant. Please return." Fengqing squeezed out a smile, trying her best to appear calm. "I didn't know that old Lin had already returned. With you here, there naturally won't be any problems. There are still many matters that need to be dealt with, so I'll be leaving first." Old Lin bowed. "See you out, miss." Fengqing turned. At this time, Yindai suddenly appeared. She loudly said, "Miss Fengqing, please wait a moment." She quickly walked out. Several days ago, there were several materials that didn't meet the requirements. Teacher has compiled a list and asks you to prepare another one. Ah, to think that there would be such a thing. Mr. Ningqin, please rest assured that I will prepare it as soon as possible. Fengqing received the jade slip and probed it with her divine sense. In the next moment, she relaxed. Old Lin frowned. He stepped forwards and said, "Miss, these matters have always been handled by this old servant. How about I handle them instead?" Fengqing smiled. "That should be the case. Then, I'll have to trouble old Lin. I will ruthlessly punish those incompetent subordinates and prevent similar matters from happening again." Old Lin nodded. Miss is too considerate. He received the jade slip and probed it with his divine sense for several breaths of time. When he didn't sense anything wrong, he relaxed a little. It seemed he had been too sensitive, but he didn't care. He was more cautious. This matter concerned his master's great cause, and he couldn't afford to be negligent. As for Qinyu, although his master seemed to have everything under his control, old Lin still found it hard to dispel a bit of dread in his heart. Fengqing bid her farewells and left. Compared to the calm expression she had when she arrived, her heart was filled with worry. Although she was still worried, she had calmed down a great deal. The jade slip just now had only listed the names of several items, but it also included the words peace and heart. Fengqing didn't believe that it was a coincidence that Qinyu had Yundai deliver the jade slip to her. These two words were clearly meant for her. Since Qinyu wanted her to feel at ease, he must have remembered his previous promise. Right now, he was Fengqing's only hope. In the lakeside courtyard, Yundai entered the living room. "Teacher, Miss Yundai has already looked through the jade slip." Qinyu nodded. "I understand." Seeing that she hadn't left yet, he looked up and met his disciple's worried eyes. After a moment of thought, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Yindai was aware of the contents of the purchase order he had proposed. Since Sky Declaring Pavilion had directly agreed to it, it was clear there was some hidden meaning behind it. For such a massive amount of wealth to be obtained, the risks he would face would inevitably be directly proportional. Yindai nodded. "I believe in teacher. You will definitely be able to deal with it. Then I will go and cultivate." She bowed and excused herself. She clenched her fists. She had to work even harder. She didn't expect to be able to protect teacher, but she could at least help him in some matters. She didn't need to bear everything by herself. Doorlies flashed out. She looked in the direction that Yindai left and smiled. This little girl, her temperament isn't bad at all. Qin Yu lightly said, I only care about those that are good to me. With a double meaning, he went straight to the point. All right, let's talk about your preparations. This is going to be a tough battle. If something goes wrong, we will all be in deep trouble. Dorley smiled charmingly. Don't worry, this big sister loves you. I will definitely do my best and not let anything happen to you. She walked over and whispered several words to him. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. Is that true? How do you know? Chapter 839. Reality proved that there was no such thing as a meat pie falling from the sky. Even if it did, it would only be wrapped in a layer of sugar and filled with colorful seasonings. For instance, when Qin Yu pulled out all the wool he could get, Sky Declaring Pavilion had given in and agreed to offer up all sorts of treasures. The truth was that there was something fishy going on here. If it were the Qin Yu of the past, even if he was careful, he still wouldn't have been able to sense it. But now, Sky Declaring Pavilion's secret methods couldn't be hidden at all. There weren't many suspicious objects, and the objects themselves were of excellent quality. The only thing that appeared was the aura on their surfaces. These auras were incomparably weak and similar to the objects they were stuck to. If one wasn't careful, they would easily overlook them. Even if one sensed them, the aura itself wasn't wrong. This was the brilliance of the person who prepared all of this. There were 23 different auras, and each one was harmless. Even if they were placed together, unless all 23 of them were gathered together, there wouldn't be any change. But Qin Yu had found all the items that were stuck to the 23 auras. At this time, he grasped his fingers together, and an invisible strength wove between his fingertips. It was like a barrier, imprisoning the gray gas that was trying to escape. A dark golden light flashed in Qin Yu's eyes. The gray gas in his eyes suddenly enlarged, revealing its essence. These were tiny gray beetles. They bit each other, head to tail connected. As they felt the situation wasn't good for them, all of them became anxious and restless. Suddenly, the gray beetles seemed to feel Qin Yu's gaze. They all shivered and fell silent, as if they had fallen into hibernation. There was no more movement. These little things actually knew how to play dead. How interesting. Qin Yu's eyes flashed. He thought for a moment and lifted his other hand. With a thought, a drop of dark red blood seeped out, quietly piercing through the invisible barrier and falling into the gray gas. The gray beetles that seemed to be hibernating instantly revived. They revealed fierce expressions and directly divided up the blood. Qin Yu lightly coughed, and his face paled for a moment. But he soon restored himself and sneered. He had already pulled out the bait. Now, he just had to see whether or not they would take the bait. If he used it well, he might be able to create a great surprise. There was a hole in the ceiling, and bright light shone down, but the surroundings were pitch black. A chuckle suddenly sounded out. In my opinion, you seem to have overestimated that Ning Qin. He's already under my control. After a long period of silence, a voice sounded out from the other side. Whether you believe me or not, I will remind you once more. This Qin Yu has always given me an unusual feeling. The truth is right in front of us. Are you sure you can control him? The first voice sneered, I can absorb the strength of the backlash from my body and turn it into a controllable curse. As long as it touches his flesh and blood, it can immediately lock onto him. No matter how many methods he has, he will never be able to escape. You should know about the backlash my main body suffered in the past. Do you still think that Ning Qin has the strength to resist? Controlling him is equivalent to cutting off Master's last path of retreat. As long as this goes smoothly, you and I can truly be reborn. I hope you're right. As soon as he finished speaking, the other side fell silent. In the darkness, a cold and gloomy laugh echoed out. Of course I'm right. From the beginning, I have always been right. Master, I have respected you for countless years, feared you for countless years, hid for countless years, and hated you for countless years. Now, I desperately hope that you can come a little earlier. I will wait for you to come and settle all of our grudges. What that woman Dorley said was actually true. Yu sent a message to the Dark Parliament through a secret channel and soon received a response. Although the wording was considered calm, the joy and fanaticism in his words couldn't be concealed. These people really did know of the existence of the Myriad Dragon Body and were very interested in it. After obtaining Yu's second confirmation, the Dark Parliament immediately moved. Two senators, Jasmine and Lone Mountain, personally came to Mid-Morning City. Senior Lin closely monitored Yu's movements. But when the Dark Parliament was operating like a giant machine, even with the strength he controlled, he still couldn't completely block off their contact with Yu. He didn't know what sort of price the Dark Parliament had paid, but Yu soon welcomed the two senators in his lakeside courtyard. Of course, these were only puppets they controlled. Every senator of the Dark Parliament was incomparably mysterious. Even the senators didn't know each other's true identities. Yu's eyes swept over the medium-built man in front of him and the yellow-haired female cultivator beside him. Through the connection between the senators, he could directly determine their identities. He gestured with his hand. Senator Jasmine, Senator Lone Mountain, please sit. Jasmine said, Senator Morningstar, the Dark Parliament attaches great importance to the news you sent back. Today, I will confirm with you one last time whether or not this matter is true. Yu nodded. It is absolutely true. I can guarantee this. Good. Senator Lone Mountain revealed a smile. Senator Morningstar, if everything goes smoothly, I will owe you a great honor. Yu revealed a puzzled expression. Jasmine thought for a moment. She said, Senator Lone Mountain doesn't have much time left to live, but the Master of Sky declaring Pavilion controls the legendary Myriad Dragon Body. As long as the Dark Parliament obtains it, they can offer it to the Darkness Altar and exchange it for a gift. And that lifespan just happens to belong to one of the gifts that the Darkness Altar gives. Yu revealed a look of understanding. He cupped his hands together and said, If so, then I must congratulate Senator Lone Mountain in advance. You will be able to fulfill your wish. Lone Mountain smiled. It is all thanks to Senator Morningstar's information. If the Dark Parliament attacked with all their might, their chances of success would be extremely high. Even so, he didn't dare to be careless. Although the Sky-declaring Pavilion Master rarely took action in front of others, according to the intelligence the Dark Parliament controlled, he was a true extreme master. Moreover, he also controlled the infinitely powerful Myriad Dragon Body that was rumored to be able to destroy the heavens and earth. It was like pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth. Senator Morningstar, our time is limited, so I won't bother with pleasantries. Please tell us everything you know truthfully. Yu nodded. All right. He didn't conceal anything. He told them everything about how the Sky-declaring Pavilion Master had asked him to treat the Myriad Dragon Body. Yu didn't conceal anything, nor did it involve any secrets. Moreover, with the Dark Parliament's methods, if they were determined to investigate this matter, they would likely discover any discrepancies in Yu's words. That wouldn't be good. After listening to Yu, Jasmine revealed a relaxed expression. She glanced at Lone Mountain and said, Here, I represent the senators of the Dark Parliament to express our apologies to Senator Morningstar. We have already investigated the matter you spoke of just now. The reason for this is because Senator Morningstar hasn't joined the Dark Parliament for long, so we inevitably have some scruples. But this time, Senator Morningstar has used his actions to prove himself. The Dark Parliament guarantees that similar matters will not occur again. Yu frowned, a gloomy look in his eyes. I can understand, but I hope that this will be the last time. Lone Mountain laughed. I knew that Senator Morningstar wouldn't haggle over such minor matters. You and I still have important matters to attend to. His eyes brightened, and he eagerly said, Sky-declaring Pavilion Master has asked Senator Morningstar to treat the Myriad Dragon Body. This is simply perfect. I believe that Senator Morningstar has a way to restrict the freedom of the Myriad Dragon Body. Yu thought for a moment and slowly nodded. I can give it a try. Lone Mountain and Jasmine left with satisfaction, since they had already determined the truth of the matter. If the Dark Parliament wanted to do something, they would have to make preparations early. Dorlice flashed out. She placed her hands on her hips, a smug look on her face. How about it? Am I right? Cheney nodded. Yes. Did I help you a great deal? Cheney glanced at her, lost in thought. Dorlice anxiously said, Yes means yes, no means no. Cheney, speak with your conscience. Why are you acting so deep? Cheney took a deep breath. That's right, you helped me a great deal. Stop, that's enough. I don't want to know what happens next. Dorlice rubbed her hands together. I've helped you so much, so how can I not show my sincerity? I can see that Sky Declaring Pavilion is rich and overbearing, so they have plenty of confidence. They can definitely throw out another wave of blood. Qin Yu's lips twitched. Didn't you see the expression on Bien Chongli's face from the Internal Affairs Division? If he opens his mouth again, I'm afraid his brain vessels will explode. It's fine if we just want money, but why do we have to harm someone's life? I haven't even obtained a single piece of steel until now. All I see is someone making a fortune, and now you're telling me to cherish my life? I only want my share. Who cares if his brain vessels explode or not? Dorlice glared at him. Or, do you want to make up my share? Qin Yu frowned. He slowly said, I think Director Bien should be able to persist for a bit longer. Dorlice sneered. Is it that fun to be mischievous? Since you've agreed, hurry up and take action. The list is here. As she spoke, she threw out a jade slip. Qin Yu took it and probed it with his divine sense. His lips twitched. This woman Dorlice, it turns out her appetite was actually so good. I can help you ask for it, but I can't give it to you now. At the very least, I have to wait until this matter is over and I obtain the myriad dragon body. Dorlice screamed, Qin Yu, are you playing with me? Do you think that because I care about you that I don't dare to do anything to you? What about the most basic trust between people? She nearly went crazy with anger. This fellow was actually able to display his distrust of her in such a vivid and incisive manner. There was no one else like him. Qin Yu had no expression. You can choose to receive the goods in the future, or I will owe you another favor. But let me remind you that once you owe too many favors, it will rapidly depreciate in value. Dorlice clenched her teeth. Qin Yu, you are ruthless. Remember this from me. She turned and walked away. As she was about to leave the living room, she stopped. I will choose the future harvest, but you must give me interest. Double the amount on the list. Qin Yu smiled. A wise choice. You definitely won't regret it. As he watched her leave, he looked down at the jade slip in his hand. He rubbed his chin. Bien Chonli wouldn't really have his brain vessels explode, right? 2 hours after Qin Yu thought of this, the thin and protruding Bien Chonli collapsed behind the workbench. His body twitched and blood flowed from his head. His teeth were clenched, and one could faintly hear his angry roars as he faintly fainted. You have gone too far. Surname Ning, you have gone too far. After managing Mid-Morning City's Internal Affairs Division for so many years, Bien Chongli had earned quite a bit of wealth. But this time, Sky Declaring Pavilion had been shaken to the core. They had mobilized resources to exchange for treasures from the outside world, and in order to protect themselves, he had to spit out most of what he had spent. Now that something like this had happened, all of his 100 years of hard work and caution had become nothing but bubbles. It would be strange if he didn't faint. By the time old Lin rushed over, Bien Chongli had already been carried away for treatment. He grasped the jade slip in Bien Chongli's hand and slowly took back his divine sense. Give it to him. Give it all to him. Every single word in this sentence emitted a steaming cold air. Surname Ning, even if your greed could contain the entire world, in the end you will still end up empty-handed. Chapter 840. When Ning Qin finally left, Bien Chongli, who had been crying tears of joy on the sickbed, suddenly fainted because of the violent fluctuations in his mind. This startled his wives and concubines into crying again and again. They rushed up and massaged him, allowing him to slowly recover. Master, you absolutely cannot have anything happen to you. Otherwise, what are we to do? The wife gripped her handkerchief, her eyes red and swollen like peaches. Bien Changli gasped for breath as he laughed. Don't cry. As long as that surname Ning leaves, my illness will be mostly gone. In another 10 years or so, our Bien family's great family business will be recovered. Although he said this, Bien Changli still felt heartache as he thought of his greatly reduced wealth. His cheeks twitched. He would never forget that surname Ning's great enmity. But luckily, once Ning Qin left, it was likely he wouldn't return. Although it was a bit regretful that he wouldn't be able to personally take revenge, thinking about his opponent's strength, this was undoubtedly the best result. Otherwise, if he was given a chance to attack, it would be hard to say who would live and who would die. As Bien Changli was incomparably excited, the vanished Qin Yu was riding sky declaring Pavilion's flying ship, heading towards some unknown destination deep within the Yuan mountain range. On the flying ship were Old Lin, Feng Qing, Dorlis, and Yun Dai. There were also a number of guards, their eyes surging with a sharp light, and their faces filled with the appearance of an elite. The flying ship was fast and didn't stop midway at all. It seemed that the true master of sky declaring Pavilion was already impatient. Sitting by the window, Qin Yu looked down at the boundless sea of clouds. Between the mountain ranges, fog gathered and tumbled like raging waves. Qin Yu's expression was calm, and there were no waves in his eyes. Occasionally, he would take out 1 or 2 green pills and swallow them with tea. This pill was slightly smaller than the knuckle of his pinky finger. It was a deep green color and didn't emit the least bit of smell. As Qin Yu's lips moved up and down in the silence, one could faintly hear the sound of chewing. Dorlis turned her head and glanced. She glanced again and then glanced again. Finally, she couldn't hold back any longer. She stood up and walked forwards, a curious expression on her face. Qin Yu, what are you eating? It looks so delicious. I can't. Qin Yu interrupted her. Dorlis nearly choked on her breath. Her complexion changed on the spot. She looked at Qin Yu with a sad and aggrieved expression. You've changed. You treated me so well when you needed her, and even hugged me so intimately. But when you were done with her, you immediately turned your back on me. Doesn't your conscience hurt? Yin Dai pricked up her ears to listen. Her eyes couldn't help but widen. She looked at Dorlis and then at Qin Yu, her face filled with shock. It was as if she was saying, how could you do this? Qin Yu rubbed his eyebrows. First of all, there's nothing between the two of us, so don't speak too ambiguously with me. Second of all, this thing is mine. Whether I give it to you or not is up to me. He looked up at Dorlis. Now, I will repeat myself. I will not give it to you. You, Dorlis, nose turned crooked. That damned Qin Yu, you bastard son of a bitch and a watermelon egg. Just you wait for me. In the little ledger in his heart, he made another note. Moreover, it was already densely packed with Qin Yu's countless crimes. If there really came a day when Dorlis rose to power in the future, his fate would be miserable. There was nothing more to say about this. Endure it, endure it. He had already recorded so many bills, he couldn't break them now. It wasn't time to settle accounts yet. Dorlis's expression turned cold, without the slightest hint of emotion. Qin Yu, you still owe me several favors, and there's also a pile of items on that list. I will give you a chance to erase all of this. She lifted a hand and pointed. Give me 100 similar green pills, and the debt between us will be written off. Now that I think about it, I haven't taken advantage of you in this matter. To be more precise, you have saved yourself a great deal of trouble. Qin Yu hesitated for 2 seconds. Really? Dorlis nodded. Of course. I have always kept my word. Qin Yu said deal. He stood up. Wait a moment. I will go get it for you. Remember your promise. After this transaction, we are even. Dorlis was expressionless, but she sneered inwardly. Qin Yu, no matter how cunning you are, you still want to dig your way into this old lady's trap. She didn't know what the green pills were, but there was no mistaking their alluring scent. As long as she could obtain 100 of them, the strength of her projection would greatly increase. At that time, she would be able to do many things. The first thing was to teach Qin Yu a lesson. She would have him remember that women weren't to be provoked. Women were very vengeful. A moment later, Qin Yu returned. He placed a jade bottle on the table. There are 100 pills inside. You can count them. Dorlice really began to count. 1, 2, 3. In truth, when Qin Yu agreed so easily, she still felt a bit uncertain. 100 pills, that was the correct number. She carefully put away. Dorlice took one and tossed it into her mouth. She chewed on it a few times, and her complexion darkened. Qin Yu, you dare play with me? This pill isn't right. The color was the same, and the aura was similar, but after she ate it, it didn't have any effect at all. It was like ordinary candy. Dorlice felt like her lungs were about to explode. She originally thought that although Qin Yu was a bit loathsome, he still had a basic level of sincerity. But now, his only advantage had been completely shattered. He had actually used something like this to fool her. This surnamed Qin wanted to light a sky lantern, right? This time, she really couldn't endure it. Qin Yu frowned. What's wrong? Dorlice clenched her teeth. Don't play dumb with me. The pills you ate just now weren't the ones in my hand. Qin Yu lightly said, I swear that the pills in your hand were refined together with the ones I ate just now. If there's even half a lie in my words, then let my stomach rot, and I will die a horrible death. Dorlice's aura stagnated. At her level, she certainly knew that things like oaths couldn't be spoken carelessly. Once spoken, karma would follow, and there would eventually be a day when she would be haunted by it. If Qin Yu dared to swear, could it be true? She looked at the jade bottle in her hand. As she thought about how she had used a pile of favors and treasures to exchange for 100 candy beans, her heart was in chaos. No, wait a moment. If Qin Yu said they were refined together, then there was a great deal of information hidden within. Dorlice's eyes instantly turned sharp. She stared straight at Qin Yu. Qin Yu, do you dare to swear that the materials and process used to refine these pills are all the same? The ones you were eating just now? Qin Yu looked at her, a heavy expression on his face that said, You don't trust me? He slowly nodded. That's right, I dare to swear. Then, if you don't have any more questions, I will go back and rest. This is the way of the world. Where did the most basic trust between people go? Dorlice was thoroughly bewildered. It was actually true, but it clearly shouldn't be like this. Just where did the problem go? Yindai watched from the sidelines. Although she didn't know what trick her teacher was playing, it was clear that the big-breasted Dorlice had suffered a great loss this time. As she thought, her figure was too tyrannical. In the eyes of her teacher, this sort of thing wasn't worth mentioning at all. She gloatingly smiled and turned to leave. This woman was in a bad mood right now, so she didn't want to stay and be the punching bag. After closing the door, Qin Yu couldn't help but laugh. This woman, Dorlice, had been completely played over by him. She was indeed smart, but since Qin Yu dared to swear an oath, he certainly wasn't afraid of violating it. Those green pills were indeed refined from the same pill furnace, the same materials, and the same process. Even the batches of pills could be said to be from the same furnace. However, it was in the state that everything was exactly the same, but the pills refined were completely different. The appearance and the smell that ordinary people couldn't touch were completely the same, but the effects were worlds apart. What Qin Yu ate was the real deal, and what Dorlice obtained were sugar pills. Of course, calling them sugar pills was too much of an injustice. After all, the materials themselves were incomparably precious. In order to refine them, all of the materials he obtained from Sky Declaring Pavilion had been used up. As for the pill refining formula, it had appeared in his mind after he fused with the jade egg. It just so happened that he could use it now. Dorlice's nose was quite useful. Otherwise, Qin Yu wouldn't have eaten the pills in front of her. Qin Yu rubbed his nose. It seemed that he had exposed his impure intentions from the start. Haha, he didn't care about it anymore. In any case, the problem had already been solved. Otherwise, if he left a bunch of favors for Dorlice, who knew what she would come up with next? As Dorlice's thoughts were in chaos, and Qin Yu was feeling refreshed, to the east of the Upper Prime Mountain Range, in the hinterland of the Eastern Great Plains, a team from Dragon City was flying towards them. Jolie sat in the carriage, the dragon mark between her eyebrows flashing. Her face was dignified and dignified, as beautiful as a goddess, descending from the heavens. One couldn't help but feel awe towards her, not daring to look straight at her. Around the carriage, with the Shadow Clan patriarch at the lead, all of the elites were dispatched. They formed a team of around 300 people. Every Shadow Clan cultivator had a solemn expression. Deep in their eyes, there was an irrepressible excitement. After waiting for countless years, this day had finally arrived. As long as the Dragon Sovereign could be resurrected, the Shadow Clan could soar into the heavens. Thinking of this, the Shadow Clan patriarch's eyes fell on the magnificent and dignified carriage. His eyes flashed for a moment before finally turning into indifference. For the sake of his clan, he would eventually have to pay a price. But as long as he could help the Dragon Sovereign resurrect, any price was worth it. Jolie didn't know that the lofty and aloof her, the most respected person in the entire Shadow Clan, had been placed on the list of sacrifices, and this list was personally passed down by the Dragon Sovereign that the Shadow Clan believed in. She also didn't know that several days from now, she would see that person once more, a person she never wanted to mention again, a person she would never be able to forget. The matters of the world were like this. They would never proceed according to the will of some people. No matter how meticulous the arrangements were, there was always a chance of accidents occurring. For instance, the Ancient wanted to take back the myriad dragon body, but didn't know that they had been waiting for this for a long time. For instance, the Master of Sky Declaring Pavilion thought that he could control Chinyu, but this was only a trap. For instance, the Dark Parliament also wanted the myriad dragon body, but didn't know that this was only Chinyu's arrangement to take advantage of the chaos. Or, for instance, the Shadow Clan of Dragon City's invasion, which would inevitably disrupt Chinyu's plans and cause the situation to become even more chaotic. But this was the real world. You never knew what would happen in the next moment, and it was impossible to control everything. The only thing that could be foreseen was that the struggle for the myriad dragon body would set off a great storm as more and more people joined in. As for who would be the ultimate winner, everyone would have to wait and see. 3 days later, Sky Declaring Pavilion's flying ship landed in a thick fog deep within the High Prime mountain range. The surrounding area was vast and boundless, and visibility was extremely limited. Moreover, it was unknown whether it was naturally like this or if someone had changed it later on, but the fog had an extremely strong, isolating ability. Chinyu walked down the stairs of the flying ship. As he looked around, he subconsciously frowned. Even with his current eyesight, he could only see through the surface of the fog. Looking deeper, there was nothing but chaos. This place was truly strange. Old Lin was the last to disembark. When he landed on the ground, he finally let out a sigh of relief. On the way here, he had been worried that Chinyu would stir up some trouble. But luckily, everything went smoothly. After entering this fog, he had arrived at his master's domain, and everything was under his control. But he didn't reveal any of this on the surface. He looked at Feng Qing and cupped his hands together. "Mr. Ning Qin, you must be tired from the journey. Please follow me and rest for a while. Once you're fully recovered, you can come with me to see Master." Qin nodded. All right. Since he had come here, he would listen to the arrangements. Before seeing the myriad dragon body, Qin would maintain absolute silence. He followed Old Lin forwards. Although the fog was thick and isolated his divine sense, he seemed to be very familiar with this place. After walking for a while, they arrived at a courtyard hidden in the fog. Old Lin stopped. He smiled and said, "We will rest here today. Tomorrow, I will come again to invite Mr. Ning Qin." He turned and bowed. Master misses you very much. Please come with me to see him first." Feng Qing stiffened. She subconsciously looked at Chinyu and then stopped. Her heart was filled with panic. She took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Okay, hold on." Chinyu suddenly said, "If Old Lin leaves, there will only be the 3 of us left. If there is anything we need, I really don't know what to do." He looked at her, his expression calm. "How about we have Miss Feng Qing stay here, so she can accompany us? What does Old Lin think?" Old Lin furrowed his eyebrows. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly stopped. He looked deeply at Chinyu and said, Since Mr. Ning Chin has spoken, then we will do as you say. Miss will stay here and come with Mr. tomorrow. He cupped his hands together and left. Feng Qing let out a long breath. Her legs buckled and she nearly fell to the ground. She didn't dare to say anything, only looking at him with gratitude in her eyes. Since he had already agreed to protect Feng Qing as much as possible, Qing didn't want to go back on his word as long as it was within his ability. He nodded at her and looked up. Then he walked towards the courtyard. Let's go. Let's settle down first. Just as they were about to arrive, they were suddenly arranged to stay for the night. Compared to the fact that they had been constantly rushing all the way here, it was clearly a bit strange. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.